Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellency, distinguished guests, I am delighted to welcome you today to the program called Farmers of the Future. It is the first time that at Seeds&Chips we have such a large delegation of farmers here present with us today. And I am delighted that they came because I think it's an integral part of all the discussions that we are having here today. How can we talk about food and agriculture without involving farmers? This is a unique opportunity for us to come together, for farmers, to meet innovators, to meet policymakers, to meet food companies, and to talk together about solutions. It has been my personal mission for the past year to gather as diverse group as possible with delegations from all over the world to come here and to bring them together with the bright minds of the participants here at Seeds&Chips. In order for us to view the world from another perspective, from a perspective of a farmer from Honduras or from Sudan, what are their struggles and what are they dealing with on the field and what can make a real difference in their lives? Because to feed everybody on this planet now and in the future, we don't necessarily need new revolutionary innovations. We need the current innovations to be accessible to everyone. But we can only achieve this if we meet each other, if we talk to each other, and if we listen to each other. And that's why I'm very, very grateful to all the sponsors that have come together to set this Farmers of the Future event, make this possible. They have contributed to the afternoon program, and they have made it possible for us to have a delegation of farmers from Honduras, Algeria, Bolivia, Sudan, the Netherlands, Cameroon, India, and South Africa. I think that's already an applause to be made there. And so why are farmers and smallholder farmers so relevant? Aren't we industrializing? Aren't we supposed to become as big as possible? We'll talk about that later with our keynote speakers. But I think we've all come to realize the limitations of industrialized farming, and we're looking for the innovative new ways of farming and to really see who and in what way will there be a farmer of the future. And I have the delight to present to you our first keynote speaker of today, who will enlighten us on the relevance and true impact of smallholder farmers around the world. He's born and raised in rural Togo and has spent a decade working in the private sector. In 2008, he was elected the Prime Minister of the Republic of Togo and served until 2012. Subsequently, he was appointed Deputy Director General of the International Labour Organization before being nominated as the President of the International Fund for Agricultural Development of the United Nations. So for over 30 years, our next guest speaker has worked to improve the lives of some of the world's most vulnerable people. And that's why it's an honor and a pleasure to introduce to you our first keynote speaker of today, President Hungbo. Please welcome.
Your Royal Highness Princess Victoria de Bourbon de Parme, Excellency, Honorable Minister of Agriculture for the Netherlands, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me first thank you for giving us the honor by inviting us to this afternoon discussions. And we are very pleased to have the opportunity to address all of you. This summit, which brings together diverse stakeholders, is quite important for us all because we do know the task of finding the right solutions to create sustainable food systems has to be shared. That task has to be shared by us all. Over the next 15 years, the food demand in developing countries is expecting to increase by 25%, with growth of 55% expected in sub-Saharan Africa. Smallholders, they can play a major role in meeting this demand, particularly in contributing to the food security and also to take advantage of the expanding markets and by improving their livelihood and their income. So my first point, my first argument is the challenge of the population growth, the gap in meeting the increasing demand. It is rather an opportunity for the smallholders around the world. But they can't achieve this without investment. They can't achieve this without an enabling environment. They can't achieve this without sound policies and strong partnership. This will require coordinated support from governments, development institutions, the private sectors, the civil societies, and others. The International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, we target investments in the poorest countries and in the poorest region of those poorest countries, focusing on women. In other words, our really focus are the poorest that we know, and that should not be left behind. Since 1978, that's 40 years that the IFAD was created, roughly our business model, which is to provide very low conditions, soft condition loans to smallholders through sovereign borrowing, i.e. through borrowing to the government. We have been able to provide 20 billion in very low interest. And to just quickly give you what we do, 2/3 of our portfolio are 0% interest, 10-year grace period, which gives us, after 10 years, when we start collecting those money back, a way to leverage the taxpayers' money that we have been entrusted. We do know that poverty and hunger are concentrated in rural areas. We invest in projects that helps smallholders to acquire the resources, the skills, and the technology that they need to improve productivity and to connect them to the markets. It's important to recall or to remind ourselves that around the world, we have 500 million small farms. Growing up, for example, in Africa and some part of Asia, 80% of the food productions are from those smallholders. Smallholder farms produce some of the world's major markets, traded agricultural commodities, and provide more than 70% of the food calorie to people in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia. If we want a world in which extreme poverty and hunger are eliminated by 2030, according to the SDG 1 and 2, then we need to invest in an inclusive and sustainable rural transformation. It's not just the production, the agricultural production, is an investment in the rural transformation. Innovation will be essential because, like all of us, smallholders face a world that is rapidly changing. Farming in the 21st century will mean connecting to modern value chains and meeting quality standards, accessing information technology, taking advantage of new and improved seeds, and diversification of productions, let alone bearing in mind the climate change into new agricultural practices. Innovations has always played a central role for us in IFAD, from promoting water use efficiencies to sustainable land management or biogas and solar energy, to remote sensing for weather-indexed insurance, or the use of IT to connect with markets and financial services. In fact, as I'm speaking to you, 70% of our portfolio today are related to the value addition across the whole value chain, instead of 20 years ago focusing on the basic production. I mentioned a while ago the importance of also integrating climate-smart agriculture into the new practices in the small farm. In 2012, IFAD, with the support of a lot of our member states, we launched what we call the ASAP, which is the Agriculture Adaptation for Smallholder Agriculture, in a way to ensure that the smallholders also integrate the climate change into their practices. And this has been one of the major successes that IFAD has recorded in the past several years. Innovation is also key if we want to engage the youth. We all know it. The young people are not only looking to inherit the farming systems of their parents. We need them to be the driving force of the beneficiaries of a new kind of rural economy and rural society. Therefore, investment strategies are required, investment strategy that supports innovations, investment strategy that tackles the hardship of the rural farming, investment strategy that targets the productivity of the small farms. In Uganda, we had a project, which the project for financial inclusion in a rural area, which aims to bring 750,000 youth, women and men, into saving and loans groups. Package for youth includes credits combined with financial literacy training, business development services, and mobile money products. In Mali, we have a project which is developing entrepreneurship among migration-prone young people. This project begin providing training and education to youngsters aging from 14 years of age in order to create alternatives to the temptation for forced migration. This project also uses a crowdfunding platform in a way for us to attract investment from the Malian diaspora in young people into business. My point is that transforming the rural setting is part of the solution when it comes to finding jobs for the youth and when it comes to providing alternative to migration, but also when it comes to providing alternative for the returnees from migration. Innovations, ladies and gentlemen, can also be locally grown. It's important for us not to think about innovation purely in terms of technology or purely in terms of transfer from the north to the south. Innovation can also be a blend strategy, blending indigenous knowledge and modern technology. Smallholders, farmers, and indigenous people have knowledge that can contribute also to solving many of today's challenges. In India, for example, through the Andhra Pradesh Tribal Development Project supported by IFAD, modern techniques and tribal knowledge have been brought together to develop innovative non-timber forest products. We also need to recognize that small farms are and should be businesses. I refuse to consider small farm or family farmers as a substance-driven activity, to consider smallholder farm as a last resort undertaking. This is why in IFAD we spend a big part of our project in making sure that training of the smallholders, training, organizing the farmers into farmers association, into farmers organization is critical if we want the smallholders to also have the business mindset and practice agriculture, farm or non-farm activities as a way to earn decent living. Farmers' organizations, why I'm referring to them several times, they are crucial because they make it possible for thousands of small farmers to aggregate their produce so they can work with the food system, with the private sector that is, in order to be able to be hooked to the international food systems. An example that comes to my mind, IFAD in Indonesia, for example, working with Mars in providing training, better way of farming in cocoa sector. In less than 3 years, we have seen 15,000 cocoa producers tripling their productivity and meeting Mars standard. as a consequence, not only they could increase their income because they triple their productivity, but also they have almost a guarantee market by selling to Mars. And more importantly, because they were meeting the standards set by Mars, they could also sell their product to the competition, to the Mars competition. And that is the way we believe the private sector should contribute to the challenge that the smallholders are facing. In a study done a few years ago, it becomes very clear that when you ask questions to smallholders, particularly in low-income countries, 70% will mention that access to productive resources, namely rural finance, is the number one impediment. This is why I do believe it is essential that together, I mentioned partnership at the beginning, that together we put at our head not only institutions like IFAD, not only bilateral cooperation agencies, but, and maybe more importantly, the private sectors, more importantly, the foundations, different centers, put our head together to make sure that the different components of rural financing and access thereof is made more and more possible to the young smallholders. One last point, I'm afraid I'm taking too much time. One last point that I do believe is quite critical in moving forward is the insurance, making insurance available for smallholders, particularly when it comes to insurance against droughts or climate-related disasters. This is the next challenge, in addition to the productivity that we're going to face in our fight to help smallholders, particularly in the context of SDG 2.3, calling for doubling of the productivity and the smallholders' income. That are going to be our next challenge to make sure that we can assist them in meeting this target. So finally, ladies and gentlemen, while I'm looking forward to the discussion this afternoon, I just want to leave you with this. We just cannot look at this smallholder or family farming as a standalone issue. Nobody in the rural setting will be willing to stay in a rural area to do agriculture if there is no primary school for the kids, if there is no health center for basic malaria pills. The youngsters will not remain there if, be it in a rural area, they cannot have their WhatsApp working. So it is important for us to also bear in mind that is a global approach in terms of development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Humbo. I think this has been very enlightening for us all to hear your thoughts and to hear the work that IFAD is doing, because often enough smallholder farmers are being dismissed as an old-fashioned, non-relevant sector. But as we've heard, this is not the case. Smallholder farmers provide 70% of the calories consumed per day in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia, where we expect the biggest portion of the population growth to occur. And President Hungbo has enlightened the importance of innovation that it can mean for the youth. The average age of farmers nowadays is 60. We need to engage the youth in farming, and we need partnerships and innovations to do that. And we also need to invest in women. And for that reason, I would like to ask on the stage a very special guest who has flown in today from Sudan for us to share her views. Please welcome to the stage Ms. Winnie Danielle Cody Angelo. Please have a seat. Thank you. Maybe you'd like to share with us your first reactions to President Hungbo's statement and the work that you're doing for women. Ms. Cody here is from the Nuba indigenous people of Sudan. She works with the Delibaya Nuba Women Development Organization and is an advocate for indigenous people's rights, and specifically indigenous women, who she has been working with for the past 6 years.
Okay, thank you very much. My reactions to the President's speech, first of all, I say thank you for your speech and very informative. I like what he said about building partnerships with smallholder farmers. And for us, indigenous peoples, partnerships are very important for us, especially when they're equal, where we can give what we have, what innovations we have, what knowledge we have, and then have access to information, have access to markets, have access to funding from governments and the private sector, development organizations. So it's important for indigenous peoples, indigenous women, indigenous youth to be able to be on the same platform as these other stakeholders and not have an unequal relationship where it's like I have nothing to give, because we have a lot to give, especially our traditional knowledge. Something else that he mentioned is inclusion of youth, but I also want to stress the inclusion of women, because women are the producers, they're the knowledge holders, they're the ones who transfer this knowledge to the next generation. And then that generation is able to pass it down to the next. And that's how we ensure that there is continuity in this knowledge that we hold, which we believe can play an active role and is important in achieving zero hunger, because we have food systems that can contribute towards achieving zero hunger.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. And if we talk about partnerships and possibilities for development, what would you think, what is in your area the biggest challenges? Are that climate change? Is it increasing of yield? Is it an access to market, access to finance? What is the biggest challenge for you?
Well, I don't think we can speak about one challenge, because these challenges are interrelated. So it's important for us to speak about these challenges in a holistic manner, because I can't speak about access to markets or without speaking about lack of information, lack of access to information. I can't, again, not speak about I cannot speak about land tenure, and then there's the climate change, there's the capacity building. So I can't just say this is the challenge and this is how it's going to be addressed. We need to look at it as a holistic, using a holistic approach. For instance, where I'm from, women do not have access to land. The land belongs to the men. So how are we able to get women, who again are the producers, to be able to own land, do the planting, take these things to the market, take their produce to the market, know what the market prices are? Again, we need to look at this in a very holistic, using a holistic approach.
Thank you. And President Hugbo mentioned the necessity for having WhatsApp and internet in rural areas. Is in reaching out to communities like yours, are there platforms where we can engage with each other, where we can use the technology that's out there to talk to each other?
Okay, I'd like to speak about two things. The first one is the transfer of traditional knowledge from the older generation to the younger generation. And then because the younger generation, the youth have innovations, they have access to these technologies that we speak of, the mobile technologies, and then they're able to combine their traditional knowledge and the modern technologies, and then now use that as innovations to make, so that they're able to use this innovation to...
So they're open for innovation and
Exactly.
to incorporate it in their indigenous practices.
Exactly, yes, they are. But then, again, we have to recognize that communities are different, in that I'm from a community where mobile technology might not necessarily work because we don't have that infrastructure. So even when you're speaking about investment, it's not just investment in technology, but in infrastructure where some communities can have access to these technologies. And even when that is not possible, there's already existing technologies that are being used, such as community radios, where there are programs that can be put on there that farmers can listen to and interact with the radio and be able to get information from those programs. So the possibilities are endless, really, when it comes to technologies and innovations.
Great, thank you. So I hope we've planted a lot of seeds of thought and ideas for new startups and innovators to get involved and to search for the dialogue and to really see opportunities for development together. Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next key speaker, it's a special privilege to me to introduce to you our next keynote speaker of today. She is a passionate, energetic, and dedicated woman who began her career at the Ministry of Social Affairs and Employment. In 2011, she became a member of Parliament for the Christian Union Party and focused on a range of issues, including economic affairs, social affairs, and employment. Next to her professional work, she is also involved in a variety of social charities. In October last year, she was appointed Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality of the Netherlands. Today, she will speak to us from a government perspective on how to accelerate innovation and maximize impact by seeking partnerships and working together. Please welcome to the stage one of our most charismatic ministers from the Netherlands, Her Excellency Ms. Carola Schouten.
Wow, thank you for your kind words. Princess Victoria, ladies and gentlemen, farmers, really good they are here. Thank you very much for the invitation, and it's an honor to be here to speak to you about, I think, one of the most important topics in the world, food security. And let me tell you first something about my background. Because I grew up in a tiny little village in the south of the Netherlands. And I think you can imagine it's a typically Dutch landscape, flat, wide open, green polders stretching all the way to the horizon. And this was the land of my grandfather. My grandfather had about, I think, 10 cows. We should call him today a smallholder farmer. And at this land, my parents ran a dairy farm with some 70 cows. We sold the milk, grew corn and beets for fodder. When I was young, my father passed away, and my mother ran the farm with my two sisters and me. And she's not here, but I really want to thank her for that, and I'm very proud of her, my mother. She's a very strong and bold woman. And I also learned, speaking about women and agriculture, it's the best combination, I can tell you. So I have some first-hand knowledge of the valuable work of farmers, how they provide food for their families, for the community, how they make value chains possible that countless others benefit from, and the vital role they play as stewards of our precious countryside, animals and oceans. But I also know the harsh reality of the farmer's life, the long hours of hard work, financial worries, unpredictable weather, and the frustrating lack of finance, technology, and land that prevents farmers, and especially also the smallholder farmers, from achieving their full potential. And achieve their full potential they should, not just because they deserve a better life, but because smallholders and farmers in general, but smallholders especially, can have great merits in a world that faces huge challenges like climate change, population growth, and hunger. And by 2050, we will have 2 billion more people to feed. Millions of people still go to bed hungry every night. And let's face it, after a decade of diminishing hunger, the number of hungry people increased. Famine has struck parts of South Sudan and is looming in Nigeria, Somalia, and Yemen. Causes differ, but climate change and conflict are constant factors. This is a reality, while more than 1/3 of the food we produce is discarded as waste. Its production demands an area of land that is as big as China and lots of water, 1/4 of total agricultural water use. And if food waste were a country, it would be the world's 3rd largest greenhouse gas emitter. We Dutch have learned how primary producers like farmers and fishermen can respond to that. Of course, our country is too small to ease all of the hungry stomachs just by producing and exporting enough food. We alone cannot stop climate change or food losses. But we do have some answers and great solutions to share with you. We may be small, but we are smart enough to work with many of your countries. Strong enough to share loads of knowledge and new technological solutions with you, like crops that grow in saline environments, agricultural methods or irrigation systems that work in harsh climates, innovative seeds that germ everywhere. How did we do it? How did my grandfather do it? How did my parents do it? Success is often a tale of successive events and tradition, trial and error. So in order to know, we have to consider our history, our roots and traditions. From an early age, our farmers and their families understood their common interests, such as protecting land from frequent floods. They have been acting collectively, knowing their successes highly depended on each other. They cooperated and formed farmers' organizations. Farming equipment or functions like buying and selling were shared out. Ideas were discussed, often vividly. And in fact, farmers were constantly challenged to improve their skills and those of others. And when major food crisis occurred, and yes, we even had this especially after the Second World War, They were able to react quickly, as they were so well organized. They made their mistakes collectively at an early stage, invented solutions, and adapted to the demands. Dutch farmers are always willing to share ideas and innovations. And at the end of the 19th century, the government started to finance winter school for farmers. Dutch winters are long and dark, and it's the only time of the year that farmers can sometimes be missed from the farm. Dutch governments made sure that teachers and instructors were paid to inform and educate all farmers. They established institutions and infrastructures that could pass on knowledge and practical know-how to the farmers. This was the task of National Service for Extension Services, supported by farmers' organizations. Farmers' demands were subject of scientific research, and these practices have always been supported by government. Scientists were able to carry out lots of experiments right in the farmers' stables and fields. And when farmers noticed things got out of balance or the environment risked too much damage, they could easily ask the professor. And so, we became the one country where scientific principles and workable methods were put into practice very directly. Dutch farmers have workable solutions. Scientists are interested in the farmers' needs, and the government stands close farmers and scientists and makes sure society benefits as a whole. And this, I think, is in brief the origin of the successful cooperation between farmers, authorities, and academia, who will strongly rely on each other, trust and challenge each other. We call it the golden triangle or the triple helix. The triple helix was, and still is, the key success factor for the development of agriculture. And I'm strongly convinced it is the basis for food security and nutrition, feeding the world. Furthermore, the value chains and market access for agricultural products are crucial elements. They have been strongly developed in the Netherlands, often through private cooperatives, so not government-driven. Value was added and the farmers' products were connected to the market. Finally, banks, cooperative farmer banks, are also part of this picture. Today, food is nutritious, safe, and at hand everywhere in our country. We are the world's second largest agricultural exporter, and these faculties have brought us tremendous wealth. But most of all, history taught us something much more fundamental. When smallholders do better, we all do better. It made us more aware of our collective opportunities and our responsibilities, like ensuring farmers' lives, improving food security. Why it is important to take good care of the animals that give us our meat, milk, eggs, and cheese. Why we must care for nature before nature settles up with us. And this is all relevant in the 21st century. I feel it as a responsibility and an opportunity now to share our lessons and our technologies with you and many more smallholders in Africa and other regions, so that they too can pick up their mobile phone to consult satellite data that map water consumption or crop growth on their lands, or grow those heat and drought-tolerant crop varieties, or benefit from weather forecasting systems. The sharing is best paired by investments in rural development and agriculture. We need the private sector, industries, and academia to be involved. We need governments that actively set policies, support institutions, and invest. Not only in farms, but also in people's development, in women and farm workers, in them having a fair income, financial means and land. And in particular, the young deserve our attention and support. And I fully welcome the initiative that's been taken today to offer them a platform here, so they can share their stories and exchange experiences. And therefore, a representative of the Dutch Young Farmers Association joins us today, and I'm very glad she's here, Iris Brouwers. Thank you. And let us not forget, every era, every generation has challenges of its own. And today, we have not banned hunger and malnutrition. We still need to further improve and produce more healthy food. Our world is in bare need of a productive and flexible food system that can adapt to climate change. And we have to ensure that every human being can respect needs of planet Earth, that farmers will protect the lives of animals, that we cooperate to fight loss of biodiversity and ban all food waste. But I know from my experience what hardworking farmers, fishermen, and their families are capable of, and how, with the help of others, they have come their way. Geographical and climate conditions induce them to organize and share their ideas. Governments in a row deliberately established schools and institutions and funded research, thus enabling more cooperation. We ended up with the active involvement of scientists and companies with new technologies, workable methods, and practical solutions for food production. Ladies and gentlemen, the facts of the future are unknown to mankind, but solutions are within our reach. The tools and the opportunities for a better life for us, for you, and our children are mainly in our hands, as it was also for our grandparents and our parents. So let us pick up and drive the plow for a better future for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Her Excellency. It was very useful and enlightening to have a bit of thought on how the Netherlands has become such a frontrunner in innovation, and that it has just been 2 generations ago that the Netherlands too was experiencing famine, and that the farming world looked completely different. And look at us now being covered in National Geographic as the country that can feed the world. I'm very happy that the Minister will join us in our conversation with our next farmer speaker, coming from Cameroon. Please take a seat. Coming from Cameroon, he has over 15 years of experience in youth entrepreneurship, advocacy and mobilization of youth interest in agriculture. In 2014, he established the Climate Smart Agriculture Youth Network, which is now operational in 30 countries across Africa, Asia, and North America. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Divine Danticam. And Divine, you've been very active on SDGs and in your mobilization of youth. Can you tell me your first reaction to the speech of the minister and her story about how the Netherlands has come this far, and what are your thoughts on your own network?
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be able to express my views. I think that was a very, very interesting speech, and actually what she shared there was what we call success stories to be capitalized with other countries across the world as well. Then the next thing I heard was winter schools. AFAO has what they call farmer field schools, whereby they actually build a capacity of rural farmers to engage and adapt to climate change and impacts. That's why in 2014, as you said early on, I was equally very, very happy to engage in climate-smart agriculture, whereby we are now very, very much active in ensuring that we meet the ASAP program, where that the FAD is actually delivering right now.
Great. Maybe the minister would like to ask a question too.
Yeah, because education was a very important, still is, plays a very important role in the Netherlands. How is it in your country? Is there also for the youth enough education actually also to improve agriculture and also to face challenges like climate change?
Yeah, there are a lot of programs running ongoing in Cameroon. We have the Enable program, which is the African Domain-Bound Joint Program with some member states as well, whereby they're trying to build the capacity of young people into agribusiness. They're telling the African Bank president said early on, some few months back, that the next billionaire is going to be a farmer on the continent. So the Agribusiness Program actually gives an opportunity for young people to look at agriculture as a business and not as a just like the old person's job or somebody who has not been educated, and actually telling them that it's the only sector whereby it's open to anyone, no matter your background. If you did sciences, let's say medicine, you can decide and become a nutrition practitioner within the value chain. If you did engineering, you can look at the farm-to-market roads, trying to repair the cars that are stuck in mud because they were not access to markets. So if you did accounting or law, you can become a legal advisor in the agricultural value chain. So I think that education is very key in ensuring that we have the next generation being successful farmers. And in Cameroon, again, we have the IITA program, whereby, and equally IFAD, there's an IFAD program actually going now where they call Spage something. I can't really remember the name, but I know that there's a program ongoing right now, whereby I got a lot of information by the country program director.
So you talk about the potentials and the programs that are there, but we know that urbanization is the trend and that the youth is going all to the cities. Now, being involved in youth for already over a decade and trying to get them interested into agriculture, what I hear mostly is we need to make farming sexy again. How do you make farming appealing? Are there innovations? What are the tips and tricks you can share with us?
Yeah, actually what you're trying to ask me is about rural-urban migration. So I would say that, thinking of engaging governments to invest in rural communities, that is transforming the rural communities into cities. The IFAD president mentioned it early on, it's as though we shared the same message. Let the governments be able to provide access to education in the rural community. If I, Chokam Divine, based in, say, a rural community in Gembenduka, in the east region of Cameroon, I have access to sanitation. I don't see why I should travel from Gembenduka to Yaoundé, for example, to search for good sanitation. Health access, accessibility as well. And looking at the schools, if they are affordable, and the schools can be available, but are they affordable and accessible to the rural youth? That's the problem. So we have a lot of programs ongoing, duplicating efforts, but the young people don't have access to this. So I think that if we try to transform rural communities into rural cities, we're going to stem migration. I was here in Rome a few months back. I saw a lot of Senegalese on the road. They were selling books or whatever. I told them, but these same books, you can sell them in Senegal or Dakar. Why do you decide to fly from Mediterranean Sea or whatever, travel and risk your life? They say, we don't have the opportunity. So I try to tell them that for us to stem, the agriculture is a way to go. If you want to sell these same books, why not come up with key publications? Why not come up with comic stories on agriculture, how to engage young people? And then people are going to buy it. And because that's going to inspire the other young people to get into agriculture and stem migration from the global south to the global north.
That's a great idea, and you make a lot of appeal to governments.
Yeah.
And in the crowd today, we have lots of innovators, startups. What are the ingredients and the business possibilities that you see in rural areas in agriculture?
Yeah, when you talk of innovation, innovation is not a new story or new word. It has been existing for decades. But is it accessible and affordable for a young person? We talk of mobile money or mobile phones. How many rural youths in the communities can access a mobile phone? I had the first mobile phone when I was on level 1 university. But today, we see a young guy, a young child, maybe primary or whatever, he has a mobile phone. So if we invest and insist much more on best practices and equally knowledge sharing, it's going to actually help us move towards a next and more fruitful generation. Now, a technology can, as I said earlier on, can be available, but is it accessible? While in the rural community, I can have a mobile phone, but do I have money to load my mobile phone? You know? So that's why I'm appealing to the government, and when I say government, I mean all the donors here and institutions, because when we are in the countries, we want to meet, maybe we want to talk to IFAD, we want to talk to FAO, they say, no, we work with institutions, the government. So we think that if the governments actually understand some of these bottlenecks across the countries, it's going to be very, very interesting. That's why I will keep on insisting and saying that climate-smart agriculture, which the IFAD president mentioned earlier on, and I think the Honorable Minister actually mentioned about the impacts of climate change into a sustainable future. We talk of SDG 1, SDG 2. We cannot, and will never achieve SDG 1, SDG 2 when we don't look at the climate impacts and vulnerabilities. That's why the triple wins of climate-smart agriculture, which is mitigation, adaptation, and improving productivity, ensuring that the smallholder farmer has access to rural financing is a way to go. And to end up, I think, while at the AU summit in January, I made it clear that we should be able to establish zero hunger crops, because we have environmental crops, we have health crops. Now, why not establish zero hunger crops, whereby we shall be producing and selling nutritious and affordable food for the young people across the world?
Thank you, thank you. Have you a final question from the Minister?
Yeah, it's very inspiring that you say, we know what's necessary in our country, and we know what is actually what we need from other partners. How do you, as farmers, cooperate? Because I think this is also a way to strengthen your position, also in the value chain. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think I would say here, and I underscore here, the issue of MOUs and policy engagements with the farmers or cooperatives is very, very key. Mm-hmm. For example, in Cameroon, and at the level of climate-smart agriculture, we tell young people, look at climate change as an opportunity, because it helps you to plant enough trees, especially fruit trees, whereby you can sell the mangoes in future and get some money to pay your school fees. So we connect with research institutions like IRAD, IITA, whereby they provide internship for some of our young people to actually, build their capacity and better understand what they want and what they need in the future. Now, looking at the partnership at the level of, because usually, I would say the SDGs is really, really inclusive and open and transparent compared to the MDGs, because it was not open, it was not transparent. But now with the SDGs, we actually, I was part of the young people around the world with the UN system in New York to actually carry out what they call the My World Survey, whereby we were getting the views of the young people. So that partnership between the UN system and the change, stemming away from business as usual, has actually brought a lot of changes across the world. And this partnership should not just be between, the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education or whatever. We should be able to link up with the rural community, the rural farmer, to create enough job opportunities. That's why we, again, underscore the fact that at CSAYN, we are there to create, the young person from CSAYN should be able to create jobs, not job seekers. Mm-hmm. Because if you are in agriculture and you are seeking for a job, it means you are not really confident with what you're doing. Yeah, because if you're in agriculture, you can create your little enterprise, transform. There's what called rural transformation. Just from cassava, there are a lot of derivatives you can get from cassava, drinks and all of that. So that's equally a money-making system, which we actually have to underscore and encourage other young people. And lastly, we talked about the SDGs. We've been able to translate the SDGs into 60 local languages because we realized that there was a communication breach between the rural community and the policymakers. Because when you go to the rural community, interview a young person, do you know about the SDG or whatever, he tells you, I don't understand English, I don't understand French. So if you know my native language, I'm going to be engaged in the SDGs. So that's why we took upon ourselves to translate the SDG into 60 local languages. And we signed the Zero Hunger Challenge Pledge of the UN Secretary General in 2014.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tavine. Thank you again. Thank you. And the SDGs have been mentioned, and I think it has been a revolutionary shift from the Millennium Development Goals to the SDGs, where within the SDGs there has been a prominent appeal made to the private sector to contribute into reaching the SDGs. And our next keynote speaker will talk about such type of partnerships. She has over 20 years of experience within the FAO. And she has worked and published in the areas of poverty reduction, rural development, employment, social inequality, HIV/AIDS, gender issues, and food security. Before joining the FAO, she worked at the International Labour Organization and the United Nations Population Fund. She's a national of Colombia and has a PhD in rural sociology from Cornell University. Today, she will be speaking to us about smallholder farmers and access to innovation in her capacity as the Director of Partnerships and South Cooperation Division. Please welcome to the stage Ms. Marcela Villarreal.
Good afternoon, Your Royal Highness. Congratulations for this event. Excellencies, Minister, Ambassador, President of IFAD, our sister agency farmers, all of the public today. It's a pleasure to be with you today at this important occasion and very innovative way of bringing together the farmers with innovation and private sector. If we look at the situation of agriculture worldwide, we will know that agriculture worldwide is about smallholders. 72% of all the farms in the world, 72%, have less than 1 hectare. 84% of all the farms in the world, and here I'm talking in the south and in the north, have less than 2 hectares, 84%. When we talk about agriculture in the world, we talk about smallholder farming. And therefore, the SDG number 2 that talks about doubling the productivity and the income of the smallholder farmers with very special emphasis on women, on indigenous people, on pastoralists, on fisher folk is quite important. And also, SDG 2 mentions how it is necessary to increase investment. We've already spoken about investment today. It's essential to increase investment in order to bring in technological change, to bring in rural development. That's also in the SDGs. It is fundamental to have innovation for the smallholders. If not, this will not happen. If smallholders don't have access to innovation, they will not be able to double their agricultural productivity and their incomes. So what is actually innovation? There's a definition of innovation done by the COAG, the Committee of Agriculture of the FAO, and I will read it to you. It's the process by which individuals or organizations, and I underline this because it's quite important, master and implement the design and production of goods and services that are new to them, irrespective of whether they are new to their countries or to the world. Innovation, adopting something that is new to you. But it's not only about technology. Innovation, when we talk about innovation, it's not only adopting a technology. If we have a systems approach, as we heard earlier, that's not it. Innovation is also about processes and also about organizational settings. All of that has to go together. If not, there's not going to happen. Innovation is not going to happen. Now, a lot of innovation is actually done by the farmers themselves, by the smallholders themselves, in the north and in the south, as we heard before from our farmers. Let me just give you the example of quinoa. Quinoa, today you buy it, pay a high price in the supermarkets and nice restaurants. It's the new wonder food, and you find it everywhere. Well, it was developed by Andean farmers, and if you look at the wild quinoa, you will see that it has very, very, very little yield. The actual plant of quinoa, which is an amazing plant, it adapts from 0 meters above sea level up to 4,000 meters, etc. It's an amazing plant. But the plant that we see today is due to years and years of innovation by local farmers to make it have the high yield that it has and that it can have. So innovations is very, very different kinds. It's the kind that is produced by the farmers themselves, all the way up to the kinds that are produced within the research labs around the world. So today, what kinds of innovations are available to smallholders around the world? Well, of course, you have the innovation that has been produced by the centers of research, for example, the CGIAR, the International System of Research in Agriculture, which has produced a number of improved varieties, which are available to the smallholder farmers. What the problem is it's difficult to them to have access to them and have access to the knowledge that is needed for them to be able to actually adopt them. We have a lot of innovation also, for example, in organization. And we just heard about the example of the Netherlands, the cooperative banking system. Cooperatives are fundamental as ways of organization in order to be able to face the different needs of the farmers. For every need that the smallholder has, there is a cooperative solution that will help that. Access to finance is one very important. It's a big bottleneck, access to finance for the smallholders. It's probably the most important bottleneck that they face. And there's a cooperative solution to that, including like cooperative banking models, but also access to inputs, access to negotiating prices. All this is better done through organizations and in particular through cooperatives. So there's a lot of innovation that is done through organizational settings. We just heard from Cameroon the need to have new zero hunger clubs. That's also an important innovation where you can share knowledge, where farmers can share knowledge of their own innovations or innovations that come from other parts. So that's also important. So smallholders usually are, or mostly, left alone to face enormous risks. Agriculture is about the riskiest business around, and it's very risky in terms of the weather, in terms of the different obstacles that you have, in terms of access to financing. There's huge risks that are there, and if the smallholders are to face them alone, they usually will not be able, it's not going to be easy to them to face. So what is actually missing? Well, today we believe from FAO that research is not, and the research agendas are done in a way that are not sufficiently demand-driven. It should be the farmers who tell the researchers what they need, and then the researchers should follow suit. A lot of research, high-tech research, is done and never adopted because it was not really a response to a real need from the farmers. So very importantly, it's important to bring in the farmers and their organizations, and many times it's the only ways in which they can really participate through their organizations in developing and crafting the research agendas and setting the priorities for the research institutes around the world. Today, too often the farmers, the scientists alone are the ones who are setting the research priorities. There should be a good dialogue between them, so what is actually produced in the research center is going to be very useful and therefore immediately able for adoption by the farmers. We also need a massive amount of scaling out, scaling up, and scaling out. A lot of the research, as I said before, just this wonderful research, really interesting research, but it sits in shelves. It has to be, the mechanisms need to be in place for millions and millions of farmers to be able to access those research results, work together with them, adopt them, and put them in place fully. So there is today, as we see, the role of the national extension systems is fundamental. However, we're seeing an alarming decline in the availability of extension, research and extension systems for the benefit of the smallholders. We can't emphasize enough how important the extensionists are in this sense, and how important it is to incorporate them already into the research strategy from the beginning. We need better ways of funding. From FAO, we're working on a big innovation fund. Without good investment, as was said before, we will not have the innovation that is necessary. We also have to have better ways of having accountabilities of the different actors. And very specifically, many times we see that donors fund some research, but for them it's fine to fund the research, but they're not held accountable for the uptake of the results of that research. And that is probably as important as anything else. So actually the accountability framework should go all the way up to getting the donors accountable for the uptake of the research results, rather than publishing them in journals. Capacity development, again, cannot be emphasized enough how important it is. So innovation is necessary. We've already said it, we can't say it enough. And we know that there's going to be a lot of gains from adopting innovation. And obviously, it's necessary to adopt innovation to be able to arrive at the SDG 2 targets. What are the benefits of all this? Well, the benefits obviously are going to be in the SDG framework agenda. You'll see them very clearly there. Farmers could be able to double their productivity. This means that farmers could be able to raise also their production, and we all know that by 2050 the world has to increase the production of food by 60% to feed the growing population. So the benefits of innovation are very, very evident. Agricultural productivity, spillover effects obviously into nutrition, into health obviously, and so on. I think the benefits are clearly there. Now, gender equality, will it also be a benefit? Well, no, or not necessarily. We know that if we don't have gender issues put into the design from the very beginning of the systems, of the processes, it will not happen. Women are going to be left out. They have been systematically left out throughout all the history in terms of who gets the benefits of policies. Like, for example, who gets access to extension services. FAO has a study from some years ago that shows that only 5% of extension services actually reach women. Nobody put it by design that extension services were going to reach only men. Nobody did that. But if you don't put in by design that extension services need to reach women, and then you put it into your indicators, and then you put it into your metrics, it's not going to happen. So again, innovation is fundamental. It can have a transformative effect for farmers, in particular for women, but if you don't put it in from the beginning, it will not happen. Now, adoption of innovation depends very much on the ability to share information, and to share information in a way that is meaningful for the farmers themselves. We are, from FAO, we have numerous new programs that have the goal on the farmer to farmer. Once there's an innovation at the farmer's level, or an adoption at the farmer's level also, the best way, probably one of the most effective ways to share it with others, is through the farmers themselves and sharing knowledge. I liked our representative from Sudan, what she said. It cannot be top down. It cannot be like, we know everything, you know nothing, you sit down and listen to what we tell you. It has to be a process of sharing information. Sharing in the sense of, I value the information, your traditional knowledge, the knowledge that you have developed throughout the centuries. You value mine. Let's sit down together and let's share that valuable knowledge for each of us. So it has to be on the basis of the Sudan young person said it so very nicely. It has to be on the basis of equality. There's no knowledge that is better than other knowledge. There are knowledge systems that are very valuable and need to build on each other and target the specific needs of the farmers. So South-South cooperation. We have big programs together with our sister agencies, IFAD in particular. South-South cooperation is also one very effective way of having innovations be adopted at different levels by the farmers. To end, I'd just like to say about the private sector. All actors need to be involved in our big objective of eradicating hunger. It will not happen if all the actors are not there. Of course, the civil society, of course, the governments, but very importantly, the private sector. UN in the past was a little bit kind of shy of dealing with the private sector, not us. From FAO and also our sister agencies were all open to the private sector in terms of seeing how we can all work together to bring that innovation and to help achieve the goal. We have, of course, private sector creates employment. Without employment, it was already mentioned by Cameroon, without the employment, hunger eradication is not going to happen. Let us fix more our efforts on the small and medium enterprises, including those of the smallholders, who are also, and we agree with IFAD, these are private sector. We have many examples whereby, by joining forces with the private sector, we have been able to have innovation adopted by the smallholders in terms of financing for the needs, like, for example, we have examples with Cofidis, the European Investment Plan, reducing the risk from the private sector to engage with smallholders so that they can finance smallholders, but with less of the risk, and this we're doing through this European Investment Fund and Cofidis as one example. Mars was already mentioned. With Mars, the big chocolate company, but they're also the big food safety company. We are training in farmers from the different parts of the world in terms of food safety, in their food safety center in China. Together with Google, we are helping farmers have access to satellite information for them to be able to have better plans and have better knowledge of weather, including through WhatsApp, including through applications. But again, I'd like to underline it. If we don't ensure that women will have the same access as men have to these technologies, it is not going to happen. So that's an important caveat. I'd like to finalize by the example of Scooba Rice. I really like this name, Scuba, like scuba diving, Scooba Rice. So Scooba Rice is a rice, a rice variety that is resilient and that can survive for up to 2 weeks, completely submerged underwater. This is why it's nicknamed Scooba Rice. So it was done, this innovative variety of rice, which is of course really important in terms of the climate change, weather impacts. 4 million of farmers in southern Africa are already using it in India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Laos, Philippines, and many other countries. It was developed by a CGIAR center, the International Rice Center in the Philippines, with funding from Gates, also knowledge from a University of California, Davis, and is being disseminated by FAO. This, I think, is a really good example how we can bring all of the actors together, each one of them doing their part, and therefore help many farmers be able to adapt to a changing climate, to changing weather conditions through this innovative Scooba Rice, as an example. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Villarreal. She has been very friendly to us to share all these ideas and reports and important findings of the FAO, and considering the age that we are in to sharing and to open sourcing and to opening researches like this, I want to remind everybody in the audience that all of the reports of the UN are public domain. Just go out there and search for them and get engaged and look for opportunities. Now, our final speaker for this part of the program is a gentleman from Bolivia, and I'm delighted to welcome him here on stage. He's the co-chair of the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus, promoting indigenous youth development. He served as Indigenous Fellow at the World Intellectual Property Organization in 2013 and 14. He is well versed on indigenous traditional knowledge, intergenerational transfer and innovation. Please welcome to the stage Antonio Kapai Konde-Shok. Thank you. Please have a seat. There's a microphone there. Thank you. Now, Ms. Villarreal has been speaking about the great innovation possibilities from farmers themselves, and we've already tipped on the vast variety of knowledge from indigenous farming practices. Can you give a first reaction to the speech?
Yes, well, masuma hayata winaya kapak konde satawa ya Bolivia marca yuritanza. Hello to everyone. I'm really happy to be here. Congratulations to the organizer of this event. It's a huge event and all the best. I mean, it's a successful. Yes, maybe my first reaction is it's true. I think traditional knowledge is an opportunity to invest in innovation. I don't know, I mean, there are many examples, but maybe the first one that comes to my mind is regarding the use of traditional medicine. So indigenous people, and as it was mentioned, we have developed such as different plants, such as the quinoa, a process that took a long time, I mean, for my people, especially for people in Bolivia, Quechuas and Aymara. And the same happens with medicine. So we, in a way, we understand how we could use a plant and how this plant could become a medicine. And this could save millions of lives, millions of research. It was mentioned that we need to invest in research, but I think this is a contribution that we could put there, so everyone could access to traditional medicine, to new medicine. But now this is a bit difficult because, as you mentioned, well, the UN documents are in public domain. Our knowledge is not in public domain. We want to have control over that knowledge because it's our culture, it's our identity. Many of this traditional knowledge is sacred and also secret to us. So I think we want to share this knowledge, but we want to avoid misappropriation. We want to share with you, maybe we could go to contract, I don't know. I mean, as long as we are engaged in the process to access to this traditional knowledge, we will be happy to share. Each people have their own specific ways to access to this knowledge. Every indigenous people has their own how do you call this, a stewardship relationship to that knowledge. So if you want to access, for instance, if you come to my community, I will teach you how to access to the information, to the knowledge, but also I will show you what are the obligations related to this knowledge.
Very clear. And in your role within these indigenous networks, how does it? How do you communicate between different indigenous tribes? Is there transfer and access to knowledge there? How do you deal with these issues?
Yeah, thank you. Well, yes, I think the main way how we communicate, you might, it was very challenging. I mean, for instance, our former co-chair was from Australia, Aboriginal from Australia, and the timing was really difficult, but we use our social network to communicate. That's the easiest part. But now we are trying to develop, yes, the kind of platforms for database where we could share first our aspirations, what do we want from the process, and we actually have targeted the implementation of the SDGs. As the SDGs mentions, we don't want to anyone be left behind, and of course we not want to be behind, but we also want to be very active and proactive in the implementation of the SDGs. And technology, it's a important plays an important role in this. within the indigenous youth, I think it's very interesting because at the same time we receive all this traditional knowledge, all this culture, we also face the current modern world, and we have cell phones, we have access to internet, especially the youth generation. So I think it's very interesting because now we are facing a phenomenon that we call traditional innovation. This is how we receive all this knowledge, all this heritage, and once we master this heritage, we also face the world with this knowledge. And this is very important to have access to this new technology, to this, so we could actually, because yeah, I mean, technology offers opportunities, but also challenges. We don't want to see a technology that pushes us in a position where we have to forget our culture. Au contraire, we really want to have technology that ensures us who we are, what we are. And this is where youth particularly plays a role.
Can you give us an insight in, if we talk about youth in indigenous communities, you talk about the importance of the role of different generations and how knowledge and respect is so important within the different generations. Do you see a strong urbanization and lack of interest in agriculture from indigenous youth, as you see in other areas?
Yeah, to be honest, yes. I think two major issues are when we see the rural area, particular rural area where indigenous people are, it's the migration from from rural to urban. I think the main reason that I mean, from my reality is climate change. I mean, we really depend on rain paths, and these rain paths have been changing because of climate change. And because of this, we don't see really opportunities in the rural area, so people are pushed to migrate to urban areas where, yeah, I mean, to be honest, again, urban areas are not very friendly to the diversity, cultural diversity of indigenous people. So we arrive to the cities to access education, health, well-being, but we face societies that are very discrimination in this sense. But I think
does
also
all the knowledge and indigenous culture then get lost once there is this rural to urban migration?
Yes, I mean, of course it is more difficult to have this link with the community, but I think that also we could see opportunities when we discuss, and I am happy to hear in this seats and through the presentations, I heard that there is a lot of or there, at least in the radar, is the way that we should invest in rural areas. I think that's the best that we could do. We should create opportunities in rural areas where fishing, hunting, seed producing should be an outcome. Should provide for the people, you know, to have decent life there. And in this, I think we have really interesting projects. For instance, IFAD recently launched during the Permanent Forum. The Permanent Forum of Indigenous People, it's a meeting in New York. Over 2,000 indigenous people met together to address and tell the UN what we aspire, what we want from the UN. And in this meeting, it was 3 weeks ago, IFAD launched its Indigenous People Assistance Facility. The program has run since 2007, and it has supported a lot of local projects in the communities. And now it has a particular focus on youth. And this is something, again, really key, because if we empower youth in the rural area, this is how we can be sure that they won't migrate and they won't suffer this discrimination in the urban area.
Thank you, Antonio. I think you've got an interest from our crowd to engage with indigenous people, but to also be sensitive to the traditions and the sacrecies regarding local rituals. So please, ladies and gentlemen, take the opportunity to engage with our fantastic speakers in the coming afternoon and hear more about what type of innovation can we develop together to make prosperous rural communities? Thank you. Thank you, Antonio.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a short break to reorganize the stage for two amazing panels that we've got up to speak about sector transformation. I think the need for true transformation within the agricultural system is become evident. We've got industrialized farming and smallholder farmers, and we need a sector transformation to make sure that we can feed all the people in the world in a sustainable and healthy way. So bear with us. It's going to be a few minutes, but I'll see you later. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back to the second part of our Farmers of the Future program. And this part we will have several panel discussions with interesting views on sector transformation. We'll have a special keynote speaker, and we'll also have solutions from the business industry, from Danone and Lavazza, who will share with us their investment activities in investing in smallholder farmers and how they are combining that as being part of their business strategy. And we also have a special guest speaker at the end of our program who I'll tell you a bit more later on. But first, I would like to introduce you to our next speaker, who will also be our moderator for the coming sessions. It's a great pleasure to introduce this person to you, because 15 years ago, he set up UTZ Certified, which is now, together with the Rainforest Alliance, the largest certification program on sustainable cacao, coffee, and other agricultural commodities. In 2008, he founded New Foresight, a sustainability strategy consultancy firm. In 2010, he founded Scope Insight, an organization building the first standardized and scalable methodology to professionalize farming organizations, which we viewed before how incredibly relevant that is. He is a trusted advisor of many of leading trade and industry companies, governments, NGOs, and multinationals. He is the author of a book called Changing the Food Game, and therefore it's no surprise that he lives by the motto, if you want a different outcome, you have to change the rules of the game. To kick off our second part of the Farmers of the Future program, and I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, who will share his insights on effective and sustainable sector transformation. Coming from the Netherlands, give a round of applause for Mr. Lucas Simons.
Thank you. Francesco, could I have the lights on, please? Thank you. How many of you are aware of the SDGs? All right, keep your hands up. How many of you would know the SDGs? All right. How many of you are really familiar with them? Okay, the ones with the hands up now are the 1%. According to recent studies by the OECD, 40% of the people living in the Western economies have heard of the SDGs. 20% know something about it, but only 1% really knows what they mean. And so those who are here, you are a very select club. How many of you know how many SDGs are impacted by agriculture, global agriculture? How many of you know that? Sir, how many? A lot. Anybody know a number? There are 9 SDGs impacted by agriculture. Agriculture globally is one of the most, according to me, the most unsustainable sector in the world. We already heard it this morning from great speakers. We have more than 500 million farmers. 80% of them are living or working on less than 2 hectares. There's poverty, child labor, deforestation, really, really big issues. Meanwhile, we have to produce more food in the next 40 years in our generation time than the last 8,000 years combined. Let me repeat that. In the next 40 years in our generation time, we need to produce more food than the last 8,000 years put together. Of course, simply because we have more people on this planet, we already heard about it, 9 or 10 billion people, so 2 to 3 billion people more than we have now, more money available, changing diets, larger cities, less land available. So we really have a challenge for this generation. I would consider this the big one, the big challenge for our generation. I would like to talk to you about how come we haven't solved this by now. How come this is still an issue, despite the fact that we have pumped billions and billions and billions of dollars in the agricultural systems. We have trained millions of farmers, and still this is one of the most or the most unsustainable sector in the world. What's going on? Why haven't we been able to change it? I would like to present to you 2 questions. What's going on? What's the failure? And 2, how would you change it? And it's a positive message, but it's not an easy one. The positive message is we can change it, but it's not easy, and we really have to change our game. Before I do that, is it okay if I tell a little bit about myself? I already have been very kindly introduced, but just very, very briefly. Is that okay? Yes? All right. Lucas Simons, I'm a sort of an entrepreneur. I like to start up initiatives, businesses that has a massive, massive effect, particularly in agriculture. I used to be the director of UT Certified, that label for sustainable cocoa and coffee. Anybody heard of it? Yes. Yeah, very good. I started that organization in 2002. I left it in 2008, and then I started my own consultancy company. And we are hired by agricultural sectors. That's strange. We are hired by a whole sector, the coffee sector, the cocoa sector, the soy sector, who are all desperately trying to deal with their issues, but they cannot work on them alone. And we bring them together and create large strategies. I've also created another organization, Scope Insight. We've heard this morning, and even John Kerry spoke about it this morning, it's extremely important that we see farming as a business, as a professional business. 8 years ago, we've introduced a language, an assessment on how to measure how professional are you running your farm organization. We know your strengths and weaknesses. We now know exactly what you should be doing in order to become a better business. And we can also, data-driven, link the better ones to finance and inputs. I've written the book, Changing the Food Game. And in fact, that's the reason why I'm here, because Her Royal Highness loved it so much. And have been honored to be named Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum and a Ashoka Fellow. Like I said, I would like to talk to you about 2 questions today. What's going on in this sector, and how do you change it? I've already spoke about agriculture as the one most unsustainable sector in the world. It's the biggest driver of deforestation and loss of biodiversity. 70% of all the water that we use is misused, I would almost say, in agriculture. It's one of the largest users of chemicals. It's the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. It's the largest driver for child labor, slavery, malnutrition, poverty, like I already said. Most of these SDGs that we're trying to solve are happening in agriculture on the largest scale imaginable. Meanwhile, if we look at the southern countries, the emerging economies, it's the biggest economic driver. Between 50 and 80% of all the people are employed by agriculture. They're making a living from that small plot of land. It's between 20 to 50% of the gross national products, so the economic driver of that country. While we're only investing 2 to 4% of all the money that's investing in these countries is actually going to agriculture. So something is massively wrong here. Personally, I'm fascinated about that. Because in my mind, if something is so important, agriculture, we cannot do without. We cannot survive. If we only have to do more of it, we need to produce 60% more in the next generation. If it is economically such an important driver for so many countries, then how come this is the outcome? How come it's not a driver for well-being or prosperity? But how come every time that we produce food on any scale, this is what's going on? It can be massive deforestation, child labor, a combination of the two. But every time that we do it, something like this goes wrong. And so could it be systemic? Could it be that the way we produce food and the way we trade food, that it's inherently part of the system? Let me ask you a question. Who knows this game? What is it? Monopoly, right? Who played it recently? A few people, all right. What's the outcome of this game if you play it long enough? One wins and the rest goes bankrupt, right? Question. What if you play it 10 times? What is 10 times the outcome? The same. One wins and the rest goes bankrupt. And if you would play this game 100 times, what would be 100 times the outcome? The same, right? How come? How come every time this is the outcome? Does anybody have the answer? Because of the rules of the game. If you play it according to the rules of the game, you get the outcome. Now, my question is, every time that we produce food and this is the outcome, could it be that it's because of the rules of the game? And if you want to have a different outcome, you have to change the rules of the game. Just like when you play Monopoly, it doesn't help that you give a little bit of money to the guy that is losing. The outcome will remain the same, yes? If you want to have a different outcome, we need to change the rules of the game. But first we need to understand what are the rules of the game. Would you like to know what they are? Yes? All right. The next 2 minutes will be slightly technical, and after that we're going to play our game. Is that okay? All right. When we talk about agriculture, you've heard it this morning, there are sectors that have a lot of smallholders, right? Smallholders, farmers that have 1 or 2 hectares. These are smallholders. There are also sectors where the farms are 10, 20, 30, 50,000 hectares. So some have very big farmers and very efficient and very well managed, and some sectors have smallholder farmers. Does that make sense? And so if we would draw that out, it looks like this. Some sectors is a bottom of the pyramid, only smallholders. While other sectors are a real pyramid. You have a lot of smallholders and some big ones and some in the middle. You have also some sectors that are either you're very big or you're very small, but there's nothing in the middle. Then there are some sectors where it's more an SME, it's more cooperative or smaller and medium-sized estates. Not so many smallholders, not so many big ones. And then there are some sectors that are bigger. For example, the flat pyramid is cocoa in West Africa. There, the sector is known to be very poor. Very low economic performance. They're smallholders. They cannot read or write. A poor sector. The big one on the other side, soy in Brazil. Large farms. If you have 20,000 hectares, you're a small farmer. Cotton in the United States, big. Cotton in India, very small. Now the question is, if you have a sector that has a lot of smallholders and that is poor, are you surprised that there's poverty, child labor, slavery? No. These are symptoms of a system. And would you be surprised to learn that when a sector has bigger farms, that there's a lot of deforestation or land grabbing? No, I would not be surprised, because these are some symptoms that you would expect from these type of systems. So the symptoms, the SDGs, are symptoms of the system behind it. And now the rules of the game. What determines if a sector is smallholder driven, very big, or even SME driven, where it's much more sustainable? And now we're going to have some fun, because I will submit to you that there are 4 drivers, 4 forces, that if you play with them, you can predict. In 2 minutes' time, you will be a system reader. The first force, what do markets reward? And with markets, I don't mean necessarily the consumers, but the whole value chain that is buying and sourcing and trading. Is that value chain looking for quality? Are we looking for control d'origine? Are we willing to pay for it? Or is it lowest price, and frankly, we don't care? Well, as we all know, in many agricultural sectors, it's very price-driven, and there's very little quality element to it. So that's force number 1. Force number 2, who can be a farmer? Can anybody be a farmer? Or do you need to have certain papers or access to finance or access to technology? Well, in many cases, anybody can be a farmer. Take cocoa, for example, again. It's hard work, but anybody can be a cocoa farmer. And the same is true for many other agricultural products. It's very easy to be a farmer. That's the second force. The third force is, what's the context in which production takes place? Are we actually helping the farmer? Are we giving him what he needs? Finance, technology, education, infrastructure. We heard a lot of these things. Or are we pretty much leaving them to survive on their own? And then the fourth force, and this is always a discussion issue with some NGOs, can they get out? Are there alternatives? Can they build up a different livelihoods? And now, are you ready to become a system reader? I'll ask you, what is the outcome of this game? If markets go for the lowest price, no matter what, anybody can be a farmer in a failing context and you cannot get out. Which of the archetypes will be the outcome of this? The flat pyramid, absolutely. And it doesn't help to give training. It doesn't help to do projects. As long as the big forces are there, the sector will remain competing on poverty. We might feel good, but we're not helping. Not on a structural level, at least. The same, another one. What is if the market goes for the lowest price? It's quite difficult to be a farmer. We're taking good care of the farmers and everybody is out of the sector. You're getting a sector that starts to compete on efficiency. Bigger, bigger, even bigger. And so I hope that you understand that the problems that we're discussing in agriculture are not coincidence. They are man-made, they're not God-given. They're a result of forces, macro forces, the way we have organized, the rules of the game. And the only way to change it is an holistic approach. And we heard it luckily today a couple of times. And this is new because a couple of years ago, we didn't talk about holistic or systemic change. Now this becomes something that we start to take serious. And how do you change this? Is that you organize what should markets reward? What is the quality that we should start rewarding? Rather than competing on lowest price, what is the quality that we reward? Product quality, the way it is produced, sustainability. How do we reward it? The second one is, what are the farmers of the future? Not everybody should remain a farmer. We need entrepreneurial farmers, but not everybody is an entrepreneur. So who are they? The youth. Can we select the right ones? And then thirdly, what is it that they need so that we can help them become successful and thriving? And then finally, what do we do with the rest? And this is how you do market transformation. If you turn and influence these macro forces, and it's a matter of organization. And I love what John Kerry said this morning. I don't know any problem that cannot be solved by people making other decisions. I love that one, and because it's also true here. If we would start organizing around these forces, we can change markets. If we are not uniting and continue to compete on price, on projects, on donor money, we will continue for another 2 decades struggling. I hope this was an interesting introduction, because it's my very honor to be your facilitator for the rest of the afternoon. I've been in agriculture for the last 20 years. I know a little bit about it. I know many of the players that are here. We're working with many of you. And it's my honor to do 3 things this afternoon. One is, we'll discuss with a panel, how do you improve the business skills of farm organizations? Very important, because if they're not a businessman, then what are you? We cannot have subsistence farmers. The second panel will be about how do we create or how do we implement new technologies and innovations. And then thirdly, the call upon the private sector. What are 2 examples of business solutions that we can implement? So I think we have a fantastic panel, a fantastic afternoon with very rich speakers. I'll be introducing them in a second. And it was already mentioned, please stay in the room, because at the end of this afternoon, we'll try to squeeze the program a little bit. There's a surprise speaker, and I think that will be very worthwhile. Before we go to the panel, I was informed that there is a very high guest that would like to say something to us. And so I would like to welcome, I'm not sure, I would like to welcome to the stage Mr. Poello de Castro, Vice President Agriculture Committee at the European Parliament. Please give him a hand. Thank you. Can we have a microphone, please? Here it comes. Thank you so much. My apologies.
Thanks.
Mr. de Castro, the topic of today is farmers of the future. And we heard about professionalization, business, systemic change, investing in the rural areas. Can you tell us what is the policy of the European Union? Or better yet, first of all, what is the vision of the European Union? And therefore, what's the policy to enable
First of
this?
all, I think we should start thinking that agriculture is a part of the problem, but it can be part of the solution. No way. We need to manage 70% of our land, and the farmers is the key. So focus on that, looking what is going on and what Luca said to us today. We need to realize that the question of food insecurity come not only because we are become a lot of people in this world. It's not only a question of demographic problems. It's a question of the diet change. People in a large part of the world, in particular in Asia, is changing the diet. And they are consuming now much more meat and milk. And then the world needs to produce a lot of more cereals, soybean, corn. And this comes the problem what we have. How we can manage with the natural resources we have, which are very low, and at the same time we need to produce, what you say, 70% more in the next 40 years. This is the FAO figures, so that seems to be quite complicated, but the key is to produce more with less pollution, with more sustainability. To do that, we need innovation. The key is how we can use innovation and rules, of course. What we are doing, or what we are trying to do, is much more correct in Europe, is try to change, to adapt the agricultural policy in the European Union to take into account the question of sustainability. We have a wonderful future looking at the innovation, because we can very much introduce what we call precision farming, just to give you an example. When you can use much better our technology to produce more, but to use less chemistry. Precision farming is a way how to use in the correct way the chemistry you need to combat the disease, for example. But it's an enormous future looking at the new breeding techniques. So looking at how we can combat disease with the genetics instead of chemistry. We can reduce tons and tons of chemistry in the land. So what we are trying to do is, following this innovation approach, try to force our farmers to take care about our environment. Mm-hmm. We focus what we call the greening approach. Now, if the farmers can be helped by the agricultural European policy, common agricultural policy, they need to follow such important greening rules. And what we are doing now, we are just starting the next reform, is to how we can improve more about that. And what can do the policy to force our farmers to go in the right direction.
Yeah. If you would have to explain, if we would have a mark on everything that is produced in the European Union, made in the European Union, what would that brand stand for? Or should stand for?
The brand is important, of course. We have to realize that Europe is the most important area in the world if you compare with the United States. The food export, the European food export today is much bigger than United States export. Not everybody knows that. Because what's happened? United States maintain the leadership on commodity producers. So he produced a lot of corn, a lot of soybean, a lot of cotton, etc. But Europe has a model of European production as more high quality and final food. So we produce wine, we produce cheese, we produce other chocolate, other products with high value. So looking at the value, Europe has become most important area in the world. But of course, we need both, because otherwise, if we don't have the raw material from the United States, we are not able to produce pasta, for example, in Italy. We need to produce pasta. We are the biggest export in the world of pasta, but we need a durum wheat coming from Arizona. Otherwise, we don't have enough durum wheat in Italy. So there is a complementarity that can help this approach. Of course, when we take into the account this, we need to, with a lot of problems with rules, copyright, we have problems when we talk about geographic indication, for example. This is a big issue between European Union and United States. United States don't want to follow the European rules, but this is a very particular one. I mean, I don't know if you'd like to go deep on this.
Okay. I have one question that was burning on my mind a couple of months ago when I read in the newspaper that according to, I think it was a German study, 70% of all the insects in at least Northern Europe have disappeared, and it was linked to agricultural products. That scares me, and I know that a lot of people are scared as well. How do we deal with that on the short term?
Well, first of all, we have to realize that under the rules of a common agricultural policy, we reduce a lot the chemistry in particular the most dangerous chemistry for combating insects and other disease. And in particular, in the last year, we are very much strong on this direction. For example, is a news of a few days ago, we eliminate the using of neonicotinoids, which is a kind of chemistry was very dangerous for the bee. It was an important battle to defend the bee, and now we can say that we won. I mean, that was an important decision 2 weeks ago. Well, there is a solution. Of course, we don't have to take into account how the farmers can manage it, because the problem is there. But today, technology helps us a lot. And this is the reason, because we don't have to scare about technology. Technology is the key of the future, and we have to, to study all the aspects of implementing this technology. And in this case, the rules and the policy, the politics can do a lot. So we hope to make another step ahead in the future.
Okay, I have one more question for you.
Please.
I'm sure your job has a lot of victories and successes and celebration moments, but I'm sure it has also some moments of frustrations and things are not going the way it should go. If there was one thing that you could change, if you would be king for a day, what would that be?
Looking Europe, I think it's the most weak problem we have, in particular in this year. The feeling of the people that thinks that Europe is not, we don't need Europe. It was important to carry speech today to remember that. Because Europe is an incredible success story after the Second World War, looking at the history. Now we have a lot of what we call sovereignist, populism, that we don't need Europe. Brexit? Brexit. You have paradise is waiting for you. Now the UK people understand how deep are the problems linked to the Brexit. So Brexit can be a vaccine then for other countries in Europe. We need to realize that in the big challenges of the world today, we need Europe much more than in the past. Otherwise, we don't have the power and the energy to solve nothing. Yeah. COP21 was an incredible important success, and we could reach that because of Europe, not because the single member state. The single member state doesn't have strong enough to reach that. So what we need today is let people understand that we need more Europe, not less Europe.
Excellent. I would like to have one question from the audience. Is there somebody who would like to ask a question to Mr. De Castro? There's a mic runner. I'm not sure where it is. Is there a question? Over there. Please state your name in the microphone and the organization that you work for.
My name is Corinna Müller. I'm from the German Embassy in Rome. My question is regarding the multi-annual financial framework and the common agricultural policy. So
this is my second problem. The first, this was the second. Okay. Because everybody asking more policy in Europe. We want Europe to do more. but the member states don't want to give the money to Europe. There is an interesting comparison between Europe and the United States. We have in Europe, the budget, the multi-financial framework, is 1% of our GDP, just 1%. And what we are asking today in the proposal of Oettinger, Commissioner, is to increase by 0.1, to go from 1 to 1.1. And a lot of member states said no. But we ask more. We want more. So what Oettinger said, well, if we don't have budget, the only things we can do is to cut the budget. Where you cut the budget? Common agricultural policy and regional policy. So we lost solidarity and we lost the opportunity to make agriculture more close to the needs we need. So that's a problem. I hope that in the negotiation that just start now and before the end of this legislature time, so before the end of the year, so maybe January, February next year, I hope that the will of the European Parliament will come more taken into account by the member state than the single member state. The European Parliament asked an increasing of 0.3. So we can find some solution. But we cannot do more without budget. The United States federal budget is 23% of the national budget. 23. Europe, 1. Of course, there are differences.
All right. Thank
Thanks
you
a lot.
so much for your speech. Please give me a hand. Thank you. Thank you, sir. As I mentioned, the next topic that we will discuss with the panel is how to improve the farmer business skills. You heard it several times. Farming is a business. Farm organizations should be run as a business, as a professional business. But currently, or apparently, that is not the situation today. Imagine that we could change that farmers can actually make a living, an income, a good income, from running their farm organization as a business. Then a lot of the issues that are being solved, think of child labor, poverty, but also sending the children to school, a lot of the things that are related, all of these SDGs that are related to agriculture could be solved if we just start treating it as a business. And so in order to discuss that, we have a few very interesting panel discussions. I would like to introduce them shortly, and then please give them an applause. And then there are in total 4 people. So once I've introduced them, please give them a short applause and then welcome them on the stage. The first speaker, somebody I've known for 15 or perhaps longer years, Mr. Simon Winter. He is currently Executive Director of the Syngenta Foundation since September 2017. Before that, he was a Senior Vice President at TechnoServe in Washington. He chairs also the board of Acre, is board member of Root Capital, and additionally, he holds advisory positions with the World Economic Forum, TULA, and the Initiative for Smallholder Finance. I know him as an extremely innovating person, a thought leader, and more importantly, as a doer. So please help me welcome Mr. Simon Winter. Thank you so much. The second person I would like to call on the stage is a farmer from Senegal, Mr. Aliane Guillet. He's I have the wrong... So my apologies?
He didn't get his visa.
He didn't get his visa. He's still on my notes. My apologies. Can I ask you to help me come up with a new name? Let me introduce, meanwhile, the third person. My apologies. Mr. Yogesh Thorat, farmer from India. He's, yes. Thank you so much. A very impressive resume. 30 years old, a farmer from Maharashtra growing 2 acres of pulses. He graduated and then went back to his village. And after 4 years, he has been elected as president of the Maharashtra Farmer Producer Companies that holds approximately 53,000 farmers. And so he's a real leader. Can you imagine, 30 years old and then running an organization of 53,000 farmers. So again, please help me welcome. Thank you. Could I ask you for 1 second, please? Last minute changes. And that's it. All right, my apologies. My apologies. The third speaker is Mr. Bram Peters from the Wageningen University. Mr. Peters is an advisor at the Wageningen Center for Development Innovation with a diverse portfolio of work revolving around food and nutrition security programs, action research, and facilitation of courses for international development of professionals. Current projects he's involved in include supporting development programs on social inclusion, youth, and gender, and action research on youth in agribusiness, for instance, about youth-led organization. Please help me welcome Mr. Bram Peters.
And I will quickly steal the microphone from Lucas to introduce the fourth panelist, who I've had the pleasure to meet half a year ago in Rome during the CFS. She's coming from South Africa, a farmer who has worked in the professional field of finance before going back to her family farm and also set up an own business advising young farmers to become a farmer, to get access to finance, how to have a good business plan, and to come up with tips and tricks to engage more youth in farming. So I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Ms. Damakatsoto Sarah Sekoto, in short, No.
My apologies. All right, thank you so much for being on the stage. We're talking about a very important topic, learning farmers' business skills. Simon, may I start with you? Could you please introduce quickly what the Syngenta Foundation is doing about this topic, and what are, according to you, the 3 most important things that we need to start tackling if we want to learn farmers' business skills?
So, from the Syngenta Foundation, the perspective on helping smallholders advance their agricultural practices and therefore their incomes, their livelihoods, and their resilience centers around the use of new technology. And so helping to understand what technologies farmers need is step number 1. Step number 2 is then tailoring and adapting and improving the technologies so that they're actually useful to the farmers, respond to those needs with a good business model behind them so that they can be delivered in a business-like way. Thirdly, that we then can help the farmers manage the risk of taking on that technology, because farmers, if they're going to do it in a business-like way, are going to have to pay for it. That's going to come out of their savings, or they're going to borrow. And smallholders are typically very risk-averse, especially those that are still not yet fully commercialized. And then fourthly, they have to physically be able to access those technologies. And so that is where then the training is coming in, because they need to be trained in the use of their technologies, they need to be trained in understanding the business models, and they need partners. They need business partners nearby, whether that's through a cooperative structure or an entrepreneurial structure, who can help deliver those technologies to them, help them access the markets, help them access the finance, and train them.
And what are the 3 things that we need to focus on?
I think the 3 things that we need to focus on right now is there are already a lot of these technologies around. The problem is they're not very widely available and they're not very well known, number 1. So we need a lot more effort on replication and scaling of innovations, and not just more and more innovations that are project-based, number 1. Number 2, then we need mechanisms that can do that sharing at very low cost and at high efficiency and high impact. And therefore we need to use digital technologies. There's enormous advances going on in that technology space, and that can help us. And then thirdly, we need very professional quality management of the innovative processes and programs and so on that are going to support that transformation.
All right. Thank you so much, Simon. Mr. Torat, from your experience being the leader of such a large organization, how do you help so many farmers to improve their business skills? What are your struggles and what are your tactics to get this done?
Yeah, basically, I represent Maha Farmers Producer Company Limited, that is Maha FPC, which is consortium of around 210 farmer producer organizations in the state of Maharashtra, comprising around 53,000 shareholder farmers. So basically, it is quite difficult, and we were also curious how we can manage the organization. But whatever innovations and interventions we are talking, and we thought that we should change the rule of the games, and we call them at innovations, and our strategies we called as interventions. So basically, we are working on innovations of bringing farmers into the value chain, and secondly, we are bringing markets at the farm gate level. So whatever strategies we are following for this purpose, firstly, creating agribusiness infrastructure at the farm gate level. Secondly, providing primary and secondary agricultural processing facilities. And thirdly, giving market access to the farmers. And whatever strategy and tool is required for running this system is the farmer producer company. So we are talking about the farmer producer organizations, which are the professional organizations registered under the Companies Act. Because in India, in Maharashtra, single farmer was roped in number of cooperative institutions, and even he don't know in which organization he is representative. For credit, there was separate system. For inputs, he was aligned with some different cooperatives. So we tried to integrate the new form of the institutions called farmer producer companies. So we are shifting the approach of top of pyramid to the diamond. So our beauty of our organization is that we are in a diamond zone.
Very good, very good. Thank you, thank you. One question, Mr. Torat. If you're dealing with so many farmers, and we're talking about business skills, I'm sure not every one of your members is a business person or an entrepreneur. So how do you distinguish between the more entrepreneurial farmers, the leaders perhaps, and the ones that are the farmers?
Yeah, basically it is very important that we nurture the business activities and we develop the people. So that is our core ideology. So you cannot run the systems without the people and without the protocol. So for business skills, these institutions, we are using these institutions as a tool. So our strategy is that developing the skills through business activities. So just giving extension services, just giving training programs to the farmers is not sufficient to nurture their business activities or business skills. So last season, we had minimum support price facility to around 26,000 farmers within span of 90 days. And due to this activity, new 10,000 farmers joined farmer producer companies. So why this is happening? If we are giving direct benefits to the farmers, if we are realizing them value into their commodities or value addition into their commodities, then they are attracting toward the organizations. And importantly, globally what is happening, and those were the experiences even from the Israel, if farmers are directly, we are converting them into the entrepreneurs, or we are setting some factories and asking them to run the factories, it is not going to work. Because running a business, running the institutions are different skills. Farmers are coming together to form the institutions based on the principle of cooperation and mutual assistance. But if we want to run these institutions, we need very, very feasible business models. And unfortunately, our research institutions, our business enterprises, they don't have business models for the feasibility of the agriculture enterprises. So at that front, again, management practices, there is no management education to the farmers front, no competent youths and looking toward the agriculture. And I think there is the role of the startup culture. And we are looking toward farmer producer companies as a next generation cooperatives, and we are attracting youths to manage these institutions. So basically highly educated youths like me, they are coming down to agricultural sectors, and because we have core philosophy, if we are not doing anything, then nothing is going to happen. If we want to see the change, then you should initiate the change. And based on this ideology, a lot of younger generation is coming and doing innovations and lot of R&D into the sector and scaling up the innovations.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Mr. Bram Peters, you're from Wageningen University. I saw you nodding your head a few times when you were listening. Could you explain to the audience and to us what it is that you're doing? What are you doing research about, and what are your main findings? And what did you recognize when you heard the other stories?
Yeah, indeed. I think there's quite a few recognizable things that we're finding also in our work as part of Wageningen University and Research. To be a bit more specific, I work for Wageningen Center for Development Innovation, and our goal is to put knowledge in action, more or less, is to really translate what's happening at the university level, what's happening in the laboratories, but also to really find out how knowledge is requested or needed by farmers, especially in the field. And we try to also, like also was mentioned in earlier keynotes, is to drive the need of knowledge. The requests of farmers of what the knowledge they need should be driving research, more or less. And we are implementing, or at least implementing with local stakeholders, a number of agricultural development projects in various countries in Africa and Asia. So a case that I'd like to also bring to this discussion is the case of the Sesame Business Network, in which we are saying we want a market-led development program in the northwest of Ethiopia, in which farmers, sesame farmers, are involved, smaller farmers but also larger farmers, and that we're linking them with the whole value chain of sesame, which is a global commodity with a lot of potential as well. But we're also realizing that in order for these farmers to tap the potential of that sector, there's a need for embedding into context, having interventions for these farmers that are specifically built into communities, into the regions that this sesame is growing, built into local institutions that are there. At the same time, we also see that there's a strong need to both relate to supply chain actors, so actors that are buying the sesame from the farmers, but also very strongly relate to the business support elements and the enabling environment of these farmers. And so we work on knowledge, on capacity development of farmers on multiple levels. So it's both on competency. We work via local stakeholders. So we work via local research institutes. We work via local extension. We work via cooperatives quite a bit. And we are assuming that, at least we're assuming, and we're supporting that they are in fact training the farmers and supporting the farmers, and that farmers are also training each other. So we work on a range of competency-based skills development. So it's about agronomy training. It's about business skill development. It's about doing, for instance, business model canvases with farmers, so they know how their enterprise fits together and how it fits to the market. We also do, for instance, financial literacy, which turned out to be a very important element, especially for the sesame farmers, is that within their households, there's limited tracking of where expenses are going, especially when it comes to inputs that are needed to increase production. But we also work on cooperative level, for instance. So we're strengthening cooperatives, building their capacities in governance, but also in entrepreneurship. So cooperative entrepreneurship, like my colleague was mentioned, is really key for our way also to reach scale. So we're not just talking about a few hundred farmers, but we're trying to reach about 90,000 farmers via these different institutions. And then it's also quite important for us to work with business support and local supporting actors. So for instance, we're supporting innovations on funding mechanisms, working with financing institutions to provide tailored loans to the different types of farmers that we're seeing. So we have smallholder farmers who have limited collateral, but we have also investor farmers who have a lot more to put against the loan. But we also work, for instance, with weather risk information. So predicting weather forecasts and also keeping farmers up to date on that. And that's something we're piloting, and it seems to be helping in terms of managing risk. And then finally, it's about working with institutions and making sure that they are also developing standards according to the needs of the government, but also responding to farmers' needs as well.
Okay. Mr. Peters, it sounds like an organization from the Netherlands going down to Ethiopia and Ghana and pretty much take over the whole ecosystem and does everything. What would happen if you would stop? Is there ever an end to this type of work? Is it really scalable? And is it really sustainable?
No, that's a good question indeed, and I think that's what's happened quite a bit in the past when it comes to more or less traditional type of development projects. But in our work, and that's also why we're a capacity building organization, we're very strongly towards empowering stakeholders to take up the work and also create space for their own ideas to be replicated and to be tested again. And I think that's what we try to promote while we work via local stakeholders. We want to trigger their own interest and also bring them together. Yeah. So they can develop a shared vision for that sector.
Yeah. One more question, if I may. I heard Simon said, if I heard you correctly, Simon, that your beneficiaries or your clients, they are paying for your services. Did I understand that correctly? And is that also something that you would apply in your work? So first of all, Simon, did I understand that correctly?
It depends on which stage of the innovation process you're at. So often when we're developing the prototypes and so on, I mean, that's coming from the foundation's initial funding to do the demonstration. But once we have that business model established, then yes, we're getting local entrepreneurs, local business partners and so on to invest, and then we're expecting the farmers to pay.
Okay, yeah, very good. And is that something you're...
No, similar to what Simon has been saying is also that it depends a bit on the type of farmer that's interacting with us. I mean, we mostly work with smallholder farmers who at the moment have limited financial assets and other means to start paying for services. But we do know that eventually, as they're graduating, as they're more or less either, well, stepping in or stepping out, I think is a framework that's sometimes used. Those that try to stay in the farming business, they're encouraged to really see farming as an entrepreneur, as an entrepreneurial business. So that's what we try. That's the message we try to bring across.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Sargeta. Again, my apologies for not introducing you.
You can just call me Nono.
Oh, all right. Could you please introduce yourself? What it is that you're doing in South Africa, and how important is it for you to treat farmers as a business, and also with the appropriate business skills?
Sure. As already been mentioned, I am a commercial farmer. I started 2011 with coming back from my experience in finance. So when I walked onto the farm, that was really my strength, the fact that I actually understood finance, which a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, regardless of whether they're farming or not, often have an issue with. And so what I did is when I got there, I decided to understand the commercial farm as a business. So that's kind of where my perspective came from. And then I learned production, so that I could understand how to really how to add value with my financial background. So that's kind of why it was so important for me. So even till today, my strength is in the office running a business. I'm the one who connects with the market. I'm the one who talks to the clients, because that is also very important. But it's also important to find a good partner who's on operations, which is the production. So in our context in the country, if anyone knows, in South Africa, there's quite two markets, so to speak, with regards to agriculture. A very well-developed system that is, you know, the businesses that come out of South Africa compete widely across the world. And yet that's predominantly white-owned businesses. And so over the years, the government has really tried to assist. How do we get black farmers in? And to me, this is now where the issue, where I realized that it has not been done correctly. Yeah. So there's another two splits within now the emerging farmers, as you would call it. You have those that are going to be entrepreneurs, such as myself, I'm an entrepreneur. So focusing on business, trying to get business skills, and a lot of them are youngsters, so to speak. So if you look at the old farmers, a lot of them come from the industry already, but they've been running their smallholder farmers with their background of just sustaining themselves. And so the focus that we're working on, so I also sit on an association for farmers, and I look after the young farmers aspect. And so what I'm trying to do is, with the skills that I've learned, is to go out to stakeholders who have assisted me to say, come and help all our other farmers to, one, identify those who are like myself and actually get them skilled, especially business and technical, business-wise. And I think the way to do it as well, there's a lot of incubator models that are focused on businesses and developing entrepreneurs in other sectors. So I'm literally going through and saying, you have to also focus on agriculture. We're also trying to be business people, and it's important that we also get those skills up. And so the work around, that we're doing right now is really to orientate the stakeholders to say, there's already youth that are working in the sector. They're like me. They've already studied. They've already got. You don't need to teach me 1 + 1. You just need to teach me proper entrepreneurship skills. And so to me, that's really where the focus is in our country. Just making sure that stakeholders understand who is available in the industry and how do we upskill them. Yep. So to my last point, those smallholder farmers are also very important, players, and they do also need to be taught business skills. But the thing that's interesting about getting support from outside, it's really about how do you get hold of stakeholders that exist on the ground and build systems that are sustainable and that are continuous. So the stakeholders don't have to come and help and go. They actually need to survive within the businesses. And so this is the point that I think is important, is that the smallholder farmers will need a different type of support, but it's on a continuous basis. It just needs to be very appropriate.
Fantastic, inspiring story. Thank you so much. I have a question which I wanted to ask on stage for a long time. It's not an easy one. There seems to be different schools of thought, perhaps, or different visions. One is we need to help the farmers leave no man or woman behind. We need to go to the poorest of the poor. Or we need to go for those who are entrepreneurial because they have an opportunity to actually turn it into a business and solve the issue of farmers who are actually not an entrepreneur. We only can spend money once. So my question is, and I would like to hear an answer from all four of you. If you would have $100 million or euros, and you need to spend it for the benefit or in rural investment, for rural transformation, where would you invest it? Would you invest it in those who are the farmers of the future, the entrepreneurial one, or would you invest it in the ones who are in need of it the most, if you will? Can I ask you the first?
Absolutely. For me, I think the entrepreneurs. If you identify strong entrepreneurs across the country, this is really the model we're trying to use, and you make sure that you develop them well enough to, one, create jobs. If they create jobs, they will include the smallholder farmers. And the smallholder farmers only need to produce whatever it is they can, but they have a closer market, as opposed to going all the way to the towns or wherever the other market is. Yeah. And so it's really about looking at aggregation. Yeah. And doing so, the best way for me is to look at the real entrepreneurs and develop them.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Pampeters.
Interesting. I think I would say both, but I guess that's not the question. So, what I'm interested in is that on the one hand, I feel that entrepreneurship is definitely something to be supported because it definitely has the potential to create jobs and create other opportunities where other young people can tap into, for instance. But I'm also finding that in terms of the scale and also the urgency of the issue that was mentioned also earlier, when it comes to demographics, when it comes to the need to feed the 9 billion in the future, is that enough to realize what we like to achieve to address that urgency? And so I'd say rather than saying entrepreneurship is the way to go or the pro-poor development is the way to go, I'd say develop sort of focus on agribusiness clusters that have the potential to attract both entrepreneurs and also people looking for opportunities. For instance, in the Sesame sector, we work with small farmers But we also know that there are a lot of seasonal laborers, which are young, who are also involved in this sector. So we shouldn't close our eyes to the fact that that is happening, and that there's still a lot of young people who are finding at least an income in that sector, and we should at least work on that.
Yeah, but that's also what I understand, is that if you focus on the entrepreneurs, they will create the jobs. And that's of course for many of the other people then an opportunity. Mr. Torat, what would you do with 100 million?
According to me, investment should go into the value chain segment, because we are talking about the smallholder farmers, and there should be a holistic approach for the investment, and at least three-pronged strategies. Firstly, investment into the bringing farmers into the collectives, that is building the institutions of the farmer. Secondly, investment into the agribusiness infrastructure. And thirdly, investment to create conducive ecosystem for fostering the business activities of the agriculture.
All right, thank you so much. Simon.
Well, it's not very often I get the opportunity to pitch my $100 million idea, so here goes. No, we have a platform that we are developing, which we call the Agri-Entrepreneurs Platform. So it's actually a bit of a combination of the two. And what we're doing is and it really goes to the heart of the agenda of this day's program, which is we're incentivizing young people from farming villages to become change makers and agents of change in their communities, so that they can remain farmers, but at the same time they can also get excited about off-farm enterprise opportunities as well. They can become providers to their communities, they can become trading partners, they can become agents for financial service organizations that want to offer savings products or loan products and so on to the communities. They can also become aggregator agents for supermarket chains or processors and so on downstream. And we're developing a set of archetypes in India at the moment because we don't think that one single business in rather poor communities tends to make it work. You tend to have several business lines for these agri-entrepreneurs. And then secondly, as I mentioned earlier, the digital solution piece is absolutely critical. So a lot of the 100 million actually goes into infrastructure, innovation, so that these entrepreneurs, for example, can have an identity that is digital, so they themselves can get credit for their businesses and become trading partners and so on. They can then do training using video technologies and so on with the farmers to help move those farmers who do want to stay in agriculture along much more efficiently and so on. I wouldn't spend the entire 100 million on that, however. I would reserve about 10 million, let's say, to launch a multi-stakeholder platform that could bring together the public sector, the private sector, social innovators, and community organizations to actually then foster replication, adaptation, and scaling of this platform into other geographies as well.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Thank you so much. Personally, I think the change from in the developing aid business, if you will, the industry, is looking, seeing farmers as subsistence, poor of the poor, versus seeing them as entrepreneurs is the biggest change that we're undergoing at the moment, and that includes attracting youth, implementing new technology. So that's really inspiring story. If we can help create entrepreneurs create jobs, they can produce more food in a more sustainable way while creating an income. I think this is really the positive cycle that we're looking for. Time is up, as you can see. Please help me thank this, I would say, wonderful panel. Great to have two farmer voices on the panel as well. Thank you so much. So please give it up. Thank you. Thank you. From business skills to technical solutions and innovations from the field. We already said it's not enough just to have entrepreneurs and train them on how to run the business. They have to implement technology as well. And just to show you the power of technology, does anybody of you have an idea when the first app store opened? When did the app store open for the first time? 2008. And there were 500 apps in the App Store. Today, or in 2017, Guess how many apps have been downloaded worldwide? 179 billion apps in such a short period of time. We have an app for everything. I mean, how can you live without apps nowadays? I can even remember the days that you don't have an app for everything. It's expected that in 2021, we'll have 352 billion downloads of apps. So this is how fast technology can move and how ingrained it can be integrated in your whole lifestyle. And if we can harness the power of technology in agriculture, it can truly revolutionize the whole sector. Not just apps, drones, precision agriculture, weather, satellite data, big data. There's so much technology out there. It's already in existence. We just need to get it to the field and implement it. So to discuss this topic, I would like to introduce 4 speakers. First, Mr. Fokko Wientjes van DSM. He's Vice President Nutrition in Emerging Markets at DSM in Geneva, Switzerland. His activities are developing, building and leading new nutrition consumer business in India and in Africa, managing the large-scale public-private partnership with UNICEF and the WFP. So please give it up. Thank you. And I know you have a flight to catch. Is that true?
No, a train.
Oh, a train. Okay. All right. Okay. Very good. Second is Mr. Alejandro Sáenz. He is a food and agribusiness visionary entrepreneur whose goal is to make the Colombian agricultural sector an entrepreneurial one. Empowering the farmers is the answer, and therefore technological solutions are provided to them via his own company. Please help me welcome Mr. Sáenz. Thank you. And we have another one from the Wageningen University. The Netherlands is leading and dominating, yes. Mr. Huip Hengstdijk. For 25 years, Huip Hengstdijk has been researching agricultural systems in developing countries in Central America, Sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. He studied dry and wet areas for small and large farmers, from fundamental research to the development of farmer educational material. Please welcome Mr. Hengstdijk. Thank you. Okay. And then last but not least, she was already introduced by the Dutch Minister of Food and Agriculture, a representative of the Dutch Young Farmer Association. Please help me welcome Iris Bouwers. Ladies and gentlemen, we have about 25 minutes to discuss a very important topic, technical solutions and innovation from the field. Can I start with you, Mr. Fokko Wientjes? I know that you have initiated a very impactful initiative in Africa. Can you talk us a little bit about it and how this has helped? My apologies. How this has helped spurring implementing technical solutions?
Yeah, it's not only about technical solutions, it's about innovation, and that's a big difference, I would say. If you look at what we've been hearing a lot today in the whole conference is around farm to fork. But to be really honest, it starts with the market. So it starts with a fork to reason back to the farm. Because otherwise we are aiming up a production system and boosting that system, but we might not deliver in the end the outcome. What we did, Africa Improved Food, so we invested as DSM together with IFC, FMO, CDC in a food production facility in Rwanda, the biggest food producer in Eastern Africa right now, where we are producing porridge, fortified porridge for young children. And what we do with that is we are buying all the raw materials locally and we buy it from smallholder farmers. So we buy from at least 10,000 at this point in time, but that should grow to probably 30,000 farmers that we need to supply the material that we need. And because we are buying every season, we bring stability in the system. So we take out the volatility. We pay on time, we pay the price that is reasonable at that point in time, so not the lowest. And that actually has really transformed the market. So we've bought now in 3 seasons, and we're aiming for, so we just got the harvest in from the 3rd season. And what you see is, because we've taken out that instability in the system, the volatility out of the system, you see massive change. You see that the aflatoxin levels have reduced from 90 to 20%. Aflatoxin causes liver cancer and is extremely dominantly present in food in Africa. So that's a very serious problem that is way underrated right now. So we've been able to improve quality of what comes in. We've also seen that the yields have gone up with 10%, but what is probably even more important is that the farmer's income, first signs are that they've risen by 30 to 70%. And that is, according to people who are much more knowledgeable in the field of agriculture development, a massive transformation in farmer income. Seldomly seen that big of an impact in relatively short period. And that is also how we have to look at this. The discussion cannot only be about yield, cannot only be about quality, but it also has to be about stability, creating market and creating a stable environment where farmers can invest, where we can do insurance products, and where actually a farmer is much more stable and much more can start planning.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the project. It's really inspiring, not just what it means for the farmers, but also your product itself. It's a very, very...
Yeah, we bring nutrition, improved nutrition to 2 million children.
Yeah.
So the impact of what we're doing is massive indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I mean, a critic would say, this is not the core business of DSM. This is charity, this is CSR. How do you look at that?
Well, it is not. We've invested, and there is a drive for a return. It takes more time in this type of an environment than what we would have probably done in other environments where we invest. But this is a product and a business where we will, in the end, be profitable. Yeah. And what is important is we will be profitable, but we help local economies, we help farmers. The way forward really is that we need to go more for locally developed value change. Not only produce agricultural products and export, but produce and add value in the sense of a food production.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Mr. Science, you come from Colombia, and you told me that you're running a family-owned business. You're very proud of it. Your brother's even here in the audience, over there. Could you tell us about the type of organization that you're running, your mission, what it is that you're trying to do, and how innovation or technologies play a role in that?
Excellent. Indeed, very proud of being Colombian and a family-owned company founded by my grandfather 60 years ago. Science's FETI purpose is to transfer the agricultural sector into a more productive and sustainable business, specifically to the farmer, making it an entrepreneurial one. And to do that, we talk about productivity. So let me give you some figures about productivity in Colombia. On average, Colombia produces between 5 to 8 kilograms of tomato per meter square. I'm honored to be here with Dutch people. You know the number in the Netherlands? Anyone? It's around 100 kilograms of tomato per meter square. And that's technology. And that's exactly what our company does in Colombia. We bring technology to the Colombian farmer. We created a research station where we actually transfer this knowledge not only to the farmer, but also to the consumer itself. And I think we need to look more into the consumer, which has actually the key to changing the markets, because if the consumer is willing only for price, not looking for quality, is it a child labor, is it sustainable or not? Actually, at the end, that's the big player who can actually transform our sector. So yes, we need to look into a holistic way, producers, but finally is the consumer. I had the honor also to study in Wageningen, and Luis Fresco said a very important phrase, and it's today we're not maximizing output, we're actually optimizing it, and the consumer is actually the one who's going to give you a license to produce. Because if you're not doing it correctly, sustainable, then at the end, that consumer would not believe in what you're doing and therefore will not buy it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. What are what are some of the big barriers? What is it like to be in Colombia, having such a big mission, trying to do that from your own company? What are some of the things that you're running into?
Well, from what your slides showed us in the beginning, there were 4 forces. We directly influence the production characteristics with the inputs, but if you look at the enabling environment, and here I talk about governments, we need infrastructure. So actually the barriers of getting innovation into Colombia, just to put you an example, we import vegetable seeds from many Dutch companies, a lettuce. In order to register one lettuce takes us 2 years. The Dutch company in 2 years has many different varieties that when he wants to sell that variety to us, it simply says, well, I'm over there. It's over. That variety is already gone. The same happens with forage grasses, Gulf milk replacers. So actually, registering products in Colombia and giving them to the farmers is the biggest concern that we have. And for that, we need people, how to solve it. Yes, consumers are the key, but also partners who have a shared mission, who are looking into how to develop progress and not just giving economic aid. Governments can send Colombia today, post-conflict era. A lot of resources will start getting into Colombia because of the post-conflict. But if it's only for aid and for ambassadors or governments to take a nice picture and say, hey, this is my aid, sorry, but that's not the way. We need to create development, we need to create progress and make the entrepreneurial farmers have a better life.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, wise words. Mr. Hengsdijk, 25 years of research. What is your vision? How do we drive innovation and technology into the field?
Thank you, Lucas. In your introduction, you already showed the fast spreading of mobile communication, and currently I'm also working in a project that is opening up to Bangladesh farmers, potato farmers, ICT tools, providing ICT services to small potato farmers to better control Phytophthora infestans, also known as potato late blight, a very dangerous disease. In fact, it's the same disease that caused the Great Famine in Ireland in the 19th century. So it's quite severe disease if you not control that properly. So our service, our decision support system that we are developing together with private and public partners in Bangladesh sends an SMS to farmers when a disease is predicted to happen, so that farmers can take timely action to spray fungicides to prevent the disease to happen in their crop. And this decision support system consists of satellite information, uses satellite information to monitor crop development and crop growth. It uses weather data, observed weather data through automatic weather stations and the 3-day weather forecast. And in a model, we integrate satellite information, weather information, and this model predicts whether an infection period is going to happen. Yep. And then we send out an SMS on time. So the benefits for farmers is that they can increase their yields because their disease is better protected. They have lower production costs because they need to spray less, only when the disease is going to happen. And for the society, the costs are lower because the environmental footprint of potato production is lower. Yeah. So this is a type of precision agriculture that is now, in Western Europe, it is already happening, and we are trying to also develop this in less developed countries. The principles can also be used to optimize irrigation or optimize fertilization. And this is in fact a new way of research provided by the technologies that have not been developed for agriculture, satellite information and mobile communication, but we are now trying to use those technologies also in agriculture. And that's, I think, a very challenging new new area for research and development.
It sounds so obvious to use mobile technology, send messages to the farmer what to do when, based on all kinds of databases. In Africa, they've tried it as well, and there it turns out that a simple idea like this runs into so many problems. First of all, farmers cannot read, or the wrong farmers have the mobile phone. It's the children who have it, not the one who is actually applying the fertilizer or the chemicals. They, even if they get the message, they don't know what to do, or they don't have the chemical. And so, in order to implement such a brilliant idea, because it is, of course, the whole world needs to change. And so, to make a link to the other panel, professional or business skills, entrepreneurial farmers, is this technology going to save everybody, or is it more meaningful in the hands of the more professional, more entrepreneurial farmers?
Now, in principle, it can be used by all farmers that have a mobile phone, but we are also developing business models to make it a sustainable business case. And our vision, or our partners, local partners, they think that the farmers will not pay for it because they are not used to pay for extension services. That's something completely new. So we'll link up with private sector industry like input suppliers and potato processing companies to see whether they are able to bear the cost of disseminating these SMS to farmers. So,
right.
That's a challenge. And what you said also, illiteracy is a problem. The mobile network is not as advanced as here in Europe. Yeah. We use GSM technology at the moment because farmers do not have a smartphone yet. That will come, but it's not yet as far as here in Europe. And we should realize by implementing this type of technologies.
Yeah.
It is all locally specifically made for the conditions in a specific country.
Yeah, yeah. Ms. Bouwers, you're from the Dutch Youth Farm Organization or Association. Can you explain to us what it means and what are the 3 benefits or successes that your organization have accomplished?
3, that's a lot.
Okay.
I will try, thank you. First of all, I'm Iris Bouwers, the international representative of the Dutch Young Farmers Association. Also being active, being vice president of the European Council of Young Farmers. And that's actually the link I directly wanted to make. Because when it comes to agricultural policy in Europe, but especially in the Netherlands, we can see there's a big influence on what European politicians decide on. So if you want to change something fundamental for farmers, for young farmers, for something in the agricultural sector, you need to be at that European level. This afternoon, earlier, we listened to one of our ministers, the Minister of Agriculture, who being the Dutch Young Farmers Association, we are in great contact with. Nevertheless, there are a lot of decisions that are being made on that European level. So the European Council of Young Farmers actually made in the last revision of the Common Agricultural Policy a proposal on a top-up for young farmers to make sure that young farmers are being strengthened in their position towards older farmers, to make sure they have a better start at that moment they need it the most, just after farm takeover. And that's really important since the 3 main challenges for young farmers in Europe are access to land, access to knowledge, access to finance. And I think we all heard them many, many times today. And it actually shocked me to some extent that it's not only Europe, but that you can hear it in the voice of every single young farmer around the world, that the problems are so similar.
Same outcome, same game.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, if you heard earlier this session, Mr. De Castro from the European Union. What is your opinion about his vision, and what would your recommendation be to him?
For sure, young farmers have to be key in the future CAP. We came up with this slogan because I didn't. Young farmers from all around Europe did, and we asked the European Commission to make the new Common Agricultural Policy fit for young farmers, so young farmers proof. Make sure that 5.6% of farmers under 35, as we now have them in the European Union, make sure they're going to be more. And in order to create that agricultural sector with more youngsters involved, we need to make farming attractive again. And that's actually one of the things our minister told us this afternoon earlier. That's not just the entrepreneur himself, that's also education, that's also research, that's also innovation, but it's also the policy.
Yeah, thank you so much, because that's a great bridge to my next question. Mr. Wientjes, the CEO of DSM, a true leader when it comes to sustainability. I think recently awarded again for his impact that he has. He has a saying, and I use that a lot, always quoting him, of course, is you cannot be successful in a world that fails. That is very much true in agriculture. And you are trying to set up a factory in Rwanda. We're working in Colombia. We're working in Bangladesh, in the European Union, in the Netherlands. Where it feels we're working so hard on little islands. And also this morning or this afternoon, the Dutch Minister of Agriculture spoke about this golden triangle of research, government, and farmers. So, in your opinion, what should we be doing to create a more healthy ecosystem, so innovations like this, programs like this, have much better chance to be successful?
Well, it goes back to your introduction on the fact that this is a system change. And the system change will change when we change some of the rules. We don't even have to change extensively the rules. We just need to change some of the rules. When we talk to people and say, for instance, one of the supplies we have is to the World Food Program, and there we have to compete with companies from outside the continent. And everybody says, that doesn't sound very fair because you're on the continent and you're changing a whole system there. Why do you, as of day one, have to compete there with from outside the continent? It seems that we're not measuring the right thing. We're measuring only the cost of a product that we buy rather than the development impact that we are searching for. Yeah. So I think that is something that we need to start changing if we want to get the systems changed. What are the levers? Now, one of the levers, of course, that we see is if we would be able to get that local market up and running, if we would be able to get that system collaborating the way that we are envisioning it now, and the first signs are there, that it actually incredibly helps the competitiveness from the system, then it would work. So if donor countries would come in and help with extension service, if donor countries come in, make sure that the World Food Program buys locally rather than keeps on importing food from outside the continent, that will be a change. If we get the different companies that are working in the agriculture business to come and support it, together with the demand that we create, we can make a huge difference. And it is, as I explained, 3 harvest seasons and we already see a big shift. Yeah. It's so promising, it's so close by, and we're getting there.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Science, what would your request be to the Colombian government, if you would?
I will say that agriculture is no different to any other sector regarding the process it has. So first you have like a seed. That seed comes into a land, a greenhouse, a production site itself. There's a production process, and that's precisely what, in my opinion, we need to change in Colombia, the production process itself. And for that, we need the tools that other developed countries are having. So for instance, bumblebee pollination, biological control, those kind of things that are much more sustainable than just wasting chemicals and chemicals and chemicals. To put an example, cacao. Cacao, of course, it's being held and ate in Colombia, but with the amount of chemicals that we are using in our land, there's a lot of cadmium, and already the EU has told Colombian authorities that if they don't look at the production process, probably the cocoa from Colombia will not be able to enter here. So at the end is the production process mainly what we need to change. And for that, I will say that what we need is technical people in those positions and not politicians. Okay. That actually will be my request.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I have to end this session. We have a few minutes left, but we need to catch up my time. Thank you so much. Please help me thank this great panel.
Marco Golcieri on the side of our room here today with a big board. Marco, come on, what are we going to talk about? What are you bringing to us?
Seeds&Chips. Water first.
Water first.
Water first. So,
that's true.
You know, this is our main focus. We started this year and we will never stop till the water issues will be fixed. But,
and I think you have a special guest speaker to talk.
We have a very special guest, and so I'm just here to introduce him with you, Victoria. Thank you very much. But please, I ask you to introduce our special guest that honored us with his presence here.
Well, we are very honored to have this quick interlude on water, which is essential for farming and agriculture. A man who needs no introduction has been the Prime Minister of Italy twice within 2 decades. He was the President of the European Commission. Please give a round of applause for Romano Prodi. Mr. Prodi, you should tell us something about your visionary idea on the World Water Authority. I think with Marco insisting on talking about water, I think it's time that you tell us about that idea.
I shall do it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, possible to have it? 1, 2, okay. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I enjoyed it, and I am very happy to be here. My conversation will be very, very simple. You know, in theory, when I talk about water, I talk a couple of days. You know, now I have 5 minutes, and so I have to sum up. You know, everybody of you knows how important is water, and maybe most of part of you know how scarce is water. Only 2.5% or 3% maximum of the water in which we live in the world is sweet. So a very small part, and 70% of it is used by agriculture. So food and water, they stick together, they are together, they live together, and they are linked together, you know. And because 800 million people have problems of food, at least, you understand how important is to use water in order to improve the quantity of food produced. We are forgetting this problem because now the food prices are low enough. It's not a period of intense, you know, but things are going up and down in an unexpected way, very often in unexpected way. It happened not 5 years ago. 2012, we had terrible increase in prices and a lot of problem in poor countries, you know. And so we have to look at water, how we use it, not only to bring water to our home or factories, but to produce food. And so the linkage that we discuss in these days is the linkage for the future of mankind. right. And we have places in the world in which water is very scarce. I mentioned Sahel, I mentioned the Gulf, I could mention many other places. And, you know, we have the obligation to use technology, politics, governance, let's say all the innovation that we can to optimize the use of water in many ways. First of all, to use less water for irrigation. If we use the free flow of water as it is now in Egypt, we use 10 times more if you use rain irrigation, and 100 times less if you use the drop of it, you know. So clearly there is difference in capital, in technology, in intelligence applied to agriculture, to food. But second, we have to reuse water. And this is another problem, you know, that we have, and to clean it, because otherwise it will pollute the underground water. And this is one of the most serious problems of at least half of the world. In India, this is a tragedy. Water is going down in the field, and then is more and more polluted every year. So we have this situation. Water scarce, water deteriorated, increase need of water because, you know, people eat better. China was using in the 80s 20 kilos of meat per year, now 55. So to produce 1 kilo of beef, you need 200,000 liters of water. That's fine. So it's not because only because population is increasing, but because diet is changing, we have all this need of more food. Then, of course, the political consequence of buying land where there is available in Africa and in Latin America, land grabbing, all the political problem connected to that, a messy situation. This is why I think that we have to do something, because in the future, I do think, not because I dream it or I imagine, but I do think that the wars for water will multiply. We already have a tragedy problem. Think to Mesopotamia, Iraq and Turkey, they are really conflicting for water. And if Turkey implements all the dams that is planned to do, Mesopotamia will dry up and will totally change. We have an incredible, entangled, difficult problem for the Nile River. It lives on 1929 agreement between Sudan and Egypt, but there are all the other 9 countries that some of them needs a lot of water, starting from Ethiopia, 90 million people without water. And so now the real clash. They are building the biggest African dam, the Millennium Dam. It's top on the mountains, and Egypt is upset because already now the water, the Nile River arrives dry to the Mediterranean, almost dry to the Mediterranean. And so we need to have an authority to help Egypt to irrigate better and to decide the terrible tension between Ethiopia and Egypt. And you have incredible technical problem. For example, the Ethiopian engaged not to use for irrigation, but only for electricity. So we shall give you then the Egyptians say, well, we don't trust because there is nothing guaranteed that. And then what we do with the 5 years needed to fill up the big lake? And the answer of the Ethiopian is incredibly complicated. They simply say, look, our lake is deep and very high, and so the evaporation is almost nil. Your lake is not deep, wide, with a 25-degree temperatures average more than ours, and so we preserve water for you. But you know that in theory this could work for everybody, you know, but in real terms, who guarantees that? And I could multiply the example, Colorado River inside United States. All, you know, I have 100, Mekong and so on and so on and so on. And the lakes, Aral, well, you have imagination more than I have. So what to do? We have no one who is able to mediate and to afford this problem. We need it. This is why I was so pushing, proposing a water authority for the world. Then you may ask, why Italy? Simply because we have FAO and we have a responsibility for food. It is clear that the twin is water, you know, and so the link between the two is why Milan? Because Milan is ready for that, because there's a technical skill in the city. And what is not known, the Po Valley is the biggest producer in the world of all the strange irrigation system. And the Chinese are buying companies local because we are specializing in decentralizing irrigation system for an old tradition that we have in this field. So this is the simple reason why I am so intense in making this proposal. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this important use, because exactly 70% of our fresh water is being used for agriculture. However, we also start to consume more water ourselves as people, and our next company who will share its business solutions is Danone, one of the biggest water companies around. And I will leave you in the hands of our great moderator, Lucas Simos, to introduce Danone, who will share with us their business solutions involving farmers from Algeria. Thank you.
Wow, that was quite an interruption. That was fantastic. Thank you so much. Actually, my understanding is that we start with Lavazza. Is that correct? And I'm looking into the lights. Let me check very quickly, because people need to leave. Yeah, so Danone, yeah? Okay, good. Thank you. All right. We're gonna start with a new format now. We'll have two presentations from the business solutions. We already heard it this morning from Mr. John Kerry. He said governments can sometimes act slow, and we have a call for the private sector to step in. And so we have two examples now of private sector interventions, one from Lavazza and the other one, we'll start with it now, from Danone. And it starts with a brief presentation, and then we'll call onto stage a couple of people who are involved in the project, and we'll ask a few questions. We have to make it a little bit shorter than was planned. I hope you forgive me. I would like to call onto stage one second. That's what happens when things are changing. Here you go. Mr. Eric Soberan and Mr. Belay Hadjal. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you. Please.
Very good. So it's already a performance to find the right name, right? So,
yes.
Good evening. So my name is Eric Souberan. I'm the Danone Global Director for Nature. We don't have a sustainability director in Danone. We have a nature director. That means I'm in charge in the company of 4 big dimensions: the water resource protection, the sustainable agriculture, the climate change, and the circularity as a whole. So it's a great honor to have been invited to speak today about a few concrete actions that we're doing on the ground and what could be the business solutions. So we want to illustrate that with one specific project that we have run in Algeria, and Bilal will take you through, and with 2 farmers that are working for us every day. But first of all, it's very important to go back to why Danone is involved in such a topic. It's not something that started yesterday. Our CEO started in 1972 our journey on sustainability, saying that a company cannot thrive without its ecosystem. And I think this word of ecosystem is very important because it refers to nature, but it also refers to the people that are in this ecosystem. And the people for Danone very often are farmers. Why? Because when you're active in these 4 business lines that you can see here, of course, agriculture and farming is extremely central in what you do every day. And that's why in Danone, we are fully aware of our agricultural footprint. First of all, we directly source milk, and that's something that is not always known. We have direct contractual relationship with more than 140,000 farmers in the world. That means that we have Danoners, people working for Danone, every day on the field in contact with farmers. We don't have intermediaries for our milk. We are overall, through our Tier 1 and Tier 2 people, touching about 500,000 people. So if you think about a farm with an average of 2.3 people in a farm, we touch, in fact, directly more people through our milk sourcing than Danoners per se. And this is our ecosystem. So first of all, our ecosystem are these 140,000 farmers on the left. But they're also the animals, the 2 million cows we are working that are basically milk to sow the milk. And the land that is impacted by our activity. And we estimate that directly our impact is about 1.5 million of hectares. So having said that, we can see agriculture, and I think it's very often depicted this way as a problem. We believe that agriculture can be part of the solution. That through our agriculture footprint, we can bring positive solution to issues such as climate change, such as basically, of course, diet. That's why our mission is to bring health through food to as many people as possible. But also through basically giving livelihood to the farmers we are working with. And this is what we call regenerative agriculture. We are developing a set of criteria in our supply chain to protect soils, to empower the new generations of farmers, and this is what we're going to illustrate today, but also to respect animal welfare. Again, these 3 main priorities. And this is how we are trying to illustrate and to articulate our work. So to do that, we've developed a tool in Danone that is a specific fund. Our CEO, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, asked to the shareholders the permission to use 1% of our net profit for 5 years to create a specific fund to structure basically our action in our supply chain. And that's ecosystem, Bilal.
First of all, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Bilal Adjal from Algeria. I'm in charge of the management of ecosystem project. And let me give you a little abstract regarding the context in Algeria. Algeria is classified as second big importer in terms of milk powder importation. And we have more than 90% of farmers, they are smallholders. So, with a low milk yield and low daily milk production. So for that, we launched an ecosystem project in Algeria to give support for this category of dairy farmers and to increase their profitability and to ensure their sustainability. So the project is Halib Zaire, which means milk of Algeria. And we start by hiring or creating direct job with hiring 14 technical advisors to support small dairy farmers. And to date, we move from 9 liters per cow per day to 18 liters per cow per day. For the farmer, it's very important steps in terms of profitability and ensuring his sustainability.
So I think what we would like to illustrate through this example is this approach that's basically having project management skills and projects in a way that are managed with farmers in our ecosystems and for the farmers, because we always tend to see that we want to empower the farmers, but in fact the farmers are entrepreneurs. We've seen that before, and they are the first one to be keen on driving projects. With ecosystem project and with what you've done in Algeria, we provide a frame to do so. And I think it's the most important for us, if you agree, is maybe to allow our farmers to explain what they do every day and how through this ecosystem project with Bilal, we've been able to support.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question? You call it an ecosystem fund. What is the ecosystem activities? Does it mean you're not only helping the dairy farmers directly, but you're also ensuring support services, local infrastructure, things like that?
Yeah, the idea for us is to find projects that are coming from our supply chain, that have a positive impact, a societal and environmental impact, and therefore to strengthen the resiliency of our ecosystem. Because we fundamentally believe that we cannot thrive long term without the resiliency of our ecosystem. And it's interesting culturally to see that Danone launched the ecosystem exactly when there was a 2001 crisis. So we didn't launch ecosystem when we were thriving. We launched the ecosystem fund asking for this money to our shareholders when there was a crisis, and we realized that even more that we needed to invest in this infrastructure to build up our resiliency.
Yeah.
But the projects come from people and they are built by people.
Yeah, very good. And we heard earlier from Mr. Wientjes from DSM that they are building a factory and they see it as a business, although it might take longer to become profitable. There's a business intent behind it. Do you see this as a business intervention? Is there a return on investment ultimately, or is this for you CSR charity?
So it's not charity. There are business models. There is an investment committee. We calculate return on investment with a different set of criteria that are not necessarily only economic criteria, but in a way, if you think of it, we started a little bit in advance what the sustainable goals tell us. You cannot only judge about paybacks in hard money. So we have our own set of criteria to judge about the ROI of a project. And it's also very important to see that we are finding co-financing. And about 50% of the financing that we have put have been co-financed by other institutions or other investors that consider that the project were strong enough to co-invest.
Yeah.
So out of the 100 million euros that we have invested, in fact, it's 200 million euros.
200 million euros. Shall we call on stage your colleagues to broaden the discussion? Can I, and by the way, you probably, if you don't speak French, you probably want to use the headphones. Can I call onto stage Mr. Hamza Brouri and Mr. Hamid Zadini, please? Welcome. So we just heard that the projects are coming from the value chain, from the local farmers, and you are there. You are working with the farmers. You are in the value chain. We heard earlier that it's very important that these projects identify the needs from the farmers, and we don't come top down, but we actually listen to what dairy farmers need. Can you tell us, how does this work? How do you talk to the farmers? How do you get their ideas, and how do you turn that into a project?
Ah, d'accord. D'abord, nous, on commence par les visites terrain. Donc, dès la première visite, on fait des diagnostics initiaux dans lesquels on indique les points à améliorer et tracer un plan d'action spécifique pour chaque ferme. Donc, le cursus de formation, il est donc, se fait dans 4 mois. Il est basé sur 6 modules. Donc, on commence par l'alimentation, la reproduction, les cultures fourragères, l'hygiène et qualité du trait et le bâtiment. Après, entre-temps, on essaye de gagner la confiance de l'éleveur pour qu'il puisse pratiquer nos conseils. Donc, et dès les premiers conseils, surtout, on insiste de changer les mauvaises pratiques par des bonnes pratiques. Dans la majorité des élevages, on trouve par exemple, il n'y a pas de l'accès à l'eau pour les vaches laitières. Donc, il suffit de dire à l'éleveur qu'il faut mettre de l'eau à volonté aux vaches. Dans 3-4 jours, on remarque qu'il y a une amélioration de 3 litres en plus. Donc, c'est ça qui nous permet de gagner la confiance de l'éleveur. Et à partir du 4e mois, on commence par des regroupements, donc on fait des formations collectives. L'objectif des formations collectives, c'est de créer une communauté, donc éleveurs, collecteurs du lait, chefs de centre et services dédiés. On a des partenaires donc scientifiques aussi. Donc, ce qui nous permet aussi de passer le message très vite et d'impliquer la famille toute la famille de l'éleveur, le fils, le père et même la femme, parce que les tâches sont partagées. Voilà, c'est grosso modo.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say are the most important benefits or impacts that you have seen over the last years? We already heard that the production went up significantly, but what are other areas of impact that you see?
Bon, c'est la productivité laitière. Donc, quand on a commencé, il y avait une productivité moyenne de 9 litres. Actuellement, on est à 18 litres. En plus de nombre d'éleveurs touchés. On a commencé par des trentaines d'éleveurs. Actuellement, on a dépassé les 500 éleveurs sur le territoire de toute l'Algérie. Donc, on touche 547 éleveurs. Il y a aussi la diminution du coût du lait. La diminution du coût du lait, donc, tout est enregistré. On enregistre ça pour prouver à l'éleveur ça, pour faire la comparaison, pour convaincre d'autres éleveurs. Et actuellement, c'est les éleveurs qui sont demandeurs. Quand on a commencé, c'est nous qui essayons de convaincre les éleveurs d'adhérer au projet, mais actuellement, c'est les éleveurs qui demandent notre consultation et notre service. Voilà.
And if I may on this, it is very important because they reached a tipping point where an activity that was not something that could generate a livelihood for the farmers is becoming a livelihood. And by doing that, you create a virtuous cycle.
Absolutely.
Because that means you create activity close to the factory.
Yeah.
And around the factory, rather than importing the powder from outside of Algeria.
Yeah.
So you increase the resiliency of the system by reaching this tipping point, and that's one of the fantastic success.
Yeah, yeah. And we actually, Mr. Hamid, you are the actual dairy farmer. How has this program changed your life? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Donc, tout d'abord, je tiens à vous remercier tous de nous avoir invités pour assister à ce forum. Donc, ce qui a changé, c'est qu'on a ramené tous les éleveurs à vivre en communauté et à être dans un même climat de travail et favoriser l'entraide entre les éleveurs. C'est le point le plus important. On a pratiquement, on pourrait dire, on a créé une famille. Avant de parler d'argent, on a rassemblé les gens autour d'un projet. Et les gens y adhèrent progressivement. Donc c'est tout le, comment dirais-je, je dirais, c'est toute cette valeur ajoutée qui va pouvoir permettre à ces éleveurs, ces petits éleveurs, de devenir grands et pouvoir assurer une certaine sécurité alimentaire.
Thank you. There are in this room people from so many different nationalities, cultures, from Europe, from Latin America, Africa, Middle East. What type of advice would you have for them? What can we learn, or what can they learn from the work that you're doing?
D'abord, il ne faut pas se précipiter pour atteindre les résultats. Donc, pour changer le comportement de l'éleveur dans 2 jours ou 3 jours, c'est impossible, c'est pas possible. Donc, il ne faut pas se précipiter. Donc, il faut être très ouvert parce que on va fréquenter, vous allez fréquenter de différentes mentalités. Donc, il faut être ouvert et patient. Voilà.
Very good passion, very good. Thank you so much. I know Danone as a company, this is more than just a fund. I believe you worked first with Mars in this fund as well, but I know also that you are extremely active on the Sustainable Dairy Framework, so this is not just one fund, this is not just one activity. Danone is really, as a company, really on track to become sustainable. In fact, I believe that you are the first multinational to become a B Corp certified company, is that correct?
Yes, indeed. So, I mean, this is part of the journey that we have been going through. I referred to our commitments starting in 1972, and more recently, 3 years ago, our CEO, Emmanuel Faber, decided to engage Danone into the B Corp labelization.
Yeah.
So we aim at becoming the first multinational of our size to become B Corp.
Yeah.
It's not yet done. It's a journey. We reached 30% of our turnover as of date.
Yeah. For those who do not know, B Corp is becoming a benefit corporation. It means that you're becoming a business as a driver for good. It means that it's not just profit maximization, but actually you want to use the power of your company and the value chain to actually create impact. So it's really, and Danone is one of the most inspiring examples for me, at least, as a company that takes sustainability really serious. So please help me thank this great panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Merci.
All right, then to the sector that I fell in love with, was it almost 15 years ago when I started with Oets, the coffee sector. Once it's said, once you are in coffee, you can never leave coffee, and it's true. Although I'm working in 16 different sectors, every time that we get back into coffee, it feels like coming home. It's a beautiful product, it's a beautiful community, and it has its own shares of challenges. So today we'll hear from a company, a very well-known company, that takes sustainability very serious as well. Again, we will start with a presentation, and then we'll call onto stage several other people that are involved. I would like to call onto stage Mr. Mario Cerruti, Chief Sustainability Officer from Lavazza, Board Member, Presso International Coffee Partners at Lavazza Spa in Turin, Italy, Green Coffee and Corporate Relationship Partner, and also President of IPA Coffee Group, Board Member of ISIC, Institute for Scientific Information on Coffee, and Board Member, International Coffee Partners, and member of the Executive Board of Easy Serving Espresso. Wow, please, Mr. Mario Cerruti. Woo! Too much. Very impressive. and next, Mr. Pablo Ruiz. Mr. Pablo Ruiz works for the Hans Neumann Stiftung. That is a stifting of one of the largest coffee trader in the world, coordinating the climate projects of Hans Neumann Stiftung in Central America and coffee and climate in Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. He's also managing Feed the Future, the Alliance for Resilient Coffee in Guatemala and Honduras, and the Climate Smart Coffee with the SAFE platform in Guatemala. Also, again, very impressive. Please. Thank you so much. you have a presentation as well? All right.
What is the presentation? Is oh,
It's
loaded.
It's loaded,
Maybe you can-
absolutely. And there it is.
Okay, here it is. Right. Okay, so let me start. Sorry for the introduction. I didn't actually know all that stuff. We're here to present you some details about the initiative for coffee and climate. And let me just introduce the idea, and then our friend Pablo will go much more in deep into details, etc. Coffee and Climate is a group of people that gather in around 2010 with the idea that the changes of the climate are impacting our business, our source of material, which is basically the coffee producing countries. And we said, okay, let's try to do something. What can we do? And the idea was, the overall idea was to find good solution, proven solution scientifically and practically, and to spread those solutions in all the other countries, and so in a way kind of a brokerage. As you can see here, the goal are in reality to work for the coffee producer, for the growers, for the people, and to make them the most available knowledge, the most available techniques in order to cope with the changes, the impact of the changes of the climate change. We can go ahead. Yes, here you can say the various aspects of our program. What is for us important is really to show you the concept that is an activity that we do for the benefit of the grower. Especially in Central America, there are estimations of the need for people to move due to climate changes. If the people are not developing a good idea or good system, good ways to cope with the changes, they will have to migrate. And there are estimation of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that will have to relocate to change. This is something that, of course, is not the best, not the ideal solution. So this is, again, what our goals are. You can see here, and again, we would need a little bit more time to go more in deep. But again, mainly the idea expressed by these icons is the one I anticipate you before. It's developing knowledge for the benefit of the people. Now Pablo can go more in deep and give us some insight about the more technical aspects. We will probably not have time for questions, but in case you have, please get in touch with us with the normal email stuff, etc. We will be more than happy to develop a conversation about it.
Thank you very much, Mario, and thanks for the organization to invite us to present some of the results. To talk about coffee and climate, one of the things that we saw some years ago was that you find some adaptation models, but they were found only maybe in Africa or maybe just in Asia. And what we tried to do was to get experiences from many places. So Central America, for example, Brazil, Tanzania and Uganda, and also we are working in Vietnam. So with those, you get different models of coffee production, Arabica, and also Robusta, smallholders, some farmers who are a little bit larger, like the ones in Brazil, for example. And now we are trying to get around 70,000 farmers attended by Coffee and Climate together with a network of partners. So why this is relevant? This is relevant because in the case of Coffee and Climate in Central America, we had more than 3,000 farmers that depend on coffee production. And a lot of them, they are smallholders who are unorganized and who had low productivities. And they are facing many internal challenges, but also external challenges, like the prices, for example. So we need to improve the sector. We need to make the farmers to get stronger, and this is not going to happen with farmers who are unorganized. And these pictures that you can see here, it's how climate is affecting coffee. I don't know if you have ever realized what this is happening, that this is happening with the coffee. So you can see coffee that it's below shade, for example, and it's heavily affected by climate. You can see coffee that didn't ripe because of a drought. You can see the effects of a drought in the highlands, and also a flower abortion. And well, like I said, coffee is really a key product for the economic of all these countries in Central America. And our biggest concern is also that this is happening with coffee, but it's also happening with other sectors. And climate is affecting many other sectors, and many other sectors that maybe they are not so organized as coffee in some places, right? So we create this CNC approach, that it's a 5-step approach, where you first understand how climate is affecting your conditions, because that is really changing a lot in Central America, because we had a lot of microclimates. So you need to understand what are the local impacts of climate change in your place. And for that, we use also, we need to understand how it's impacting the coffee production. And for that, we get information from scientists, we get information from farmers, and we get information from extension agents. Then we go to prioritize and to do planning, if we need to do adaptation, if we need to do mitigation actions, and we create a concept that it's a toolbox that has some promising climate-smart agricultural practices. And then we tested together with farmers and with stakeholders to prove that these conditions, they are really working in the place, because we cannot bring concepts from different places or that haven't been tested locally. And that is something that we are trying to do a lot, to build local skills. And then we try to create a 5-step that it's lessons learned. So that is, we are evaluating that finally these climate-smart agricultural practices, they are really reducing the impacts of climate change. So we create this as a cycle, because finally you can apply it in different ways, in different locations, and finally create your own solutions. And for that, well, we had here different partners who have participated, who I would like to invite to participate with me. One of them is Previn Valdivieso is a coffee farmer from Honduras, and he had been testing different adaptation practices in Honduras. And I would like him to speak a little bit of what is these adaptation practices. He will do it in Spanish, and I will try to translate really fast into English, okay?
Please help him, welcome him.
Okay. Gracias. Soy promotor y técnico a la vez, ¿verdad? Pertenezco a una cooperativa de Honduras, Cocrevistol. Y básicamente lo que dice Pablo, tratamos de que los productores, ¿verdad? Básicamente conozcan, en primer lugar, qué es lo que está pasando con el clima, para luego realizar prácticas de adaptación en campo.
So he is a farmer, and he had been working also as a local promoter. He belongs to a farmer organization called Cocrevistol, and what he was saying is that finally what we are trying to do is that the farmer really recognize these adaptation practices by testing together.
Bueno, idealmente pues que los productores conozcan qué está pasando con el clima, como dijimos, para luego ver qué prácticas se adaptan mejor. Esto se puede lograr pues a través de parcelas demostrativas, parcelas de validación, en las cuales juntamente con el productor en campo se validan las prácticas adecuadas, ¿verdad? Y las prácticas que pueden ser creadas de mayor resiliencia para los productores.
So we established demo plots with farmers, and you can see here a picture where we had cover crops, for example, and we use it as a mulch, for example. So together with farmers, we really build the solutions. We don't tell them, this is the solution that you need to have. We really identify together with them.
Sí, bueno, las prácticas tienen que ser prácticas que respondan efectivamente a un impacto climático, como dice Pablo, por ejemplo, las coberturas, el distanciamiento de siembras, son prácticas que los productores pueden adoptar para que al final los sistemas de café sean más resilientes.
And finally, what we want to build is resilience for the coffee plantations. So I would like to thank Previn, because we don't have a lot of time to keep talking about that. But finally, what we want to talk is we want to create more resilience at the tree level. And then I would like to invite Marisol. Marisol, she works with a farmer organization in Honduras too. And they are, as farmer organizations, they are a model that is really an interesting model because they are taking action not only at adaptation to climate change, but also at mitigation to climate change. So.
Soy Marisol Velázquez y como ya Pablo lo decía, soy administradora de una empresa cooperativa en Honduras.
So she is Marisol and she is the administrator of one farmer organization in Honduras.
Nuestra empresa es una empresa de pequeños productores y pues una de las grandes virtudes y ventajas que hemos tenido es que nacimos por el impacto que ocasionaban todos los subproductos del café. Entonces queríamos disminuir la contaminación que genera el café y por eso nacimos. Entonces nuestro enfoque principal siempre ha sido la parte social, ambiental y obviamente económica.
So they are a farmer organization who mainly is formed by smallholders, and they were created because they had a lot of problems with the wastewater of the coffee. So many of the farmers, they were processing the coffee and the wastewater didn't receive any treatment, so it was going to the rivers, and that was creating a lot of pollution to the communities.
En nuestra cooperativa hemos adoptado muchas prácticas que nos están llevando a tener muy buenos resultados para enfrentar los efectos de cambio climático.
And that also is forcing them to start to do more adaptation to climate change, so they are starting to improve the climate smart agricultural practices that they are adopting.
Estamos convencidos que las organizaciones, que los productores organizados es como la forma más fácil de mitigar todos estos efectos, porque es más fácil capacitar. Nosotros en nuestro componente social estamos capacitando desde niños, jóvenes, mujeres y hombres, porque al final el impacto del cambio climático no va a afectar solo a una persona, nos va a afectar a todos.
And she's basically saying that finally farmer organization is a key model to adapt to climate change, because finally through that they are able to send messages to youth, to kids, to women, to males, and finally to understand that climate change is not going to affect a farmer, it's going to affect the family, the whole system, right?
En nuestro compromiso ambiental, como Cocrevistol, utilizamos el 100% de los subproductos del café para reintegrarlos a la tierra.
And their commitment is that they are going to, as farmer organization, treat all the waste that coffee generates, and they are going to give it back as organic fertilizers and other kind of products.
También nosotros, como un compromiso que sentimos con el ambiente, invertimos en la compra de tierra para la protección ambiental.
And one last thing is that they already start to purchase land close to a protected area that was a degraded land. It was a pasture, and now they are starting to improve that by establishing forest there. So I will close it there because we don't have a lot of time. And just the last girl that I would like to invite really quickly is Gabriela. Gabriela Jimenez is from ICAFE. ICAFE is the Coffee Institute of Honduras.
Así es.
Hi, hola, buenas tardes. Ando perdida con la hora todavía. Nosotros trabajamos para el Instituto Hondureño del Café y aglutinamos el 100% de los productores de café en Honduras, que son 120,000 productores de café que generan más de 1 millón de empleos en el país. Y estamos dirigiendo la unidad de ambiente y cambio climático con la finalidad de poder implementar estas prácticas que a pequeña escala ha mencionado Marisol y Previn, en una escala a nivel nacional, que todos nuestros productores puedan implementar este tipo de prácticas.
So she works for the Coffee Institute of Honduras. The Coffee Institute of Honduras is the one responsible to give technical assistance to 120,000 farmers. And basically what she's saying is that all the practices that we are talking here, what they are doing is basically to take it to a scale, because we need to improve the conditions of the farmer at national level. So she is the responsible of the climate change unit in ICAFE.
Estamos trabajando en 3 componentes principales. Uno es la nama de café, que busca crear acciones de mitigación al cambio climático que los productores puedan implementar en sus fincas. La segunda es un plan nacional de adaptación al cambio climático, donde estas pequeñas prácticas que ellos mencionaban, nosotros las hacemos a una escala mayor. Y finalmente en un enfoque de ecosistema, porque los cafetales en Honduras están ubicados en las zonas de amortiguamiento de áreas protegidas y necesitamos que estas áreas protegidas tengan conectividad con la zona núcleo a través de sistemas agroforestales con café.
And she basically is saying that they are working in 3 levels. One, if they recently submitted their NAMA proposal to the NAMA facility, so they are going to take actions at the coffee sector nationally. The second one is to create an adaptation plan at national level, and the third one is to improve coffee as ecosystem in Honduras, because the coffee is just a buffer area of the protected areas of all the forest basically in Honduras. So we need to keep it there because we don't have a lot of time, but basically what we want to show you is that we are trying to work in a multi-stakeholder platform in different levels, through the coffee as sector, through the farmer organizations, and also through the coffee institutes to really go to scale.
Yeah. If you Google coffee and climate, there will be, of course, a lot of additional information.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much. Most people, or a lot of people, don't realize how sensitive coffee is for climate change. If you Google their climate maps, heat maps, if with 1 degree difference, and we're now calculating scenarios for 4 degrees difference, but 1 degree difference in temperature will wipe out complete areas of coffee production, and with that will wipe out the livelihoods of many, many farmers. And I also just want to recognize that you're not doing this alone. You're working with the Neumann Stiftung, but also that's part of the International Coffee Partners, and that includes many other roasters as well. So this is not just one project, but it's actually a very great example of how quite a few roasters are working together to implement this system. So I think it's a best practice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well done. Thank you. Well done. Thank you. Being Dutch, meaning for me, being on time is very important, and I failed. My apologies for that. But we have come to the end of the day, and I want to first of all congratulate the organization. There she is. Amazing what you have pulled together. What I really found very special is, first of all, the high-level program this morning, or in the beginning of the afternoon, the systemic character, the holistic part of it, and of course the voice of the farmer. You really pulled that off. So that is really special. I don't know how if you realize it, but for most of the conferences that I'm going, the farmer is never there, and you invited the voice. So thank you for that. That's really special. Yeah. And what I also liked very much is having the opportunity to explain why a whole system fails, what are the forces, and the different streams, the different panel discussions were filling in those holes, in those different forces. So for me, it was a very holistic program. It was a pleasure and an honor to be your facilitator. Thank you so much, and I would like to give the word to Victoria. Thank you.
Rest for me, nothing else but to thank our facilitator, moderator, Lucas Simons. One big round of applause.
Thank you.
Because the holistic approach and the strategical sector transformation approach we've developed together and has really been your vision how to not just come with examples and showcase best practices, but to show that in an entire system how we can make a difference. And we need sector transformation, and we need to talk to all the parties. So thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you.